The black Labrador ran straight into the bicycle lane, dragging half a red leash behind her. Graham Mercer saw the first bicycle miss her by inches. The second rider swerved, struck the edge of a trash can, and went down hard on one knee. "Watch it!" someone shouted. The dog stopped in the middle of the path. For one dangerous second, she seemed unable to decide which way to move. Bicycle bells rang from both directions. Tires scraped across wet pavement. A boy in a blue helmet pulled his handlebars sideways and nearly collided with a woman pushing a stroller. Graham stepped into the lane and raised both arms. "Stop!" The nearest cyclist braked. Graham moved slowly toward the Labrador. She wore a leather harness with a rigid handle, a guide dog. Her ears were pulled back, her body was low, and the broken leash dragged beneath her front paws. "It's all right," Graham said quietly. "Stay." The dog looked past him toward a green bench beside the path. A young woman was sitting there. One hand gripped the edge of the bench. The other moved across the empty space beside her, searching for something that was no longer there. Mabel? Her voice was controlled, but Graham heard the fear beneath it. "Mabel, come!" The Labrador took one step toward the voice, then froze as another bicycle passed behind Graham. The woman rose too quickly and struck her knee against the bench. She reached forward, but her eyes did not follow the dog. Graham understood. He turned toward her without moving closer. "Your dog is about 15 feet in front of you," he said. "She's standing in the bicycle lane." The woman's face turned toward his voice. "Is she hurt?" "I don't think so." "Why isn't she coming?" "She looks frightened. The clip on her leash broke." Another cyclist approached. Graham signaled for him to slow down. "Would you like me to bring her to you?" he asked, "or tell you how to reach her?" The woman hesitated. It was only a second, but Graham could see what the question had given her. A choice. "Bring her to me, please." Graham crouched several feet from the dog. "Mabel," he said gently, "let's go back." The Labrador's eyes moved between him and the woman. She wore a tag on her collar, but Graham did not reach for it. He held out one hand and waited. After a moment, Mabel stepped forward. Graham caught the loose end of the leash without touching the harness. The metal snap had broken cleanly away. "I have her," he called. The woman released a breath. Graham led Mabel off the bicycle lane. As soon as they reached the bench, the Labrador pressed her head against the woman's leg. The woman dropped to one knee and ran both hands over the dog's shoulders, legs, and chest. "Mabel, are you all right?" The dog pushed closer. The woman found the broken end of the leash. "What happened?" "Two boys collided near the bench," Graham said. "One of the bicycles struck the side of it. I think the noise frightened her." "That shouldn't have happened." "It frightened everyone." "Not her." The answer came so quickly that Graham did not know what to say. The woman stood and took hold of the harness handle. Her fingers were trembling. Behind them, the boy who had fallen was getting back on his bicycle. His friend apologized several times, but neither of them approached the bench. Graham examined the broken snap. "You won't be able to attach this again." "I have another leash at home." "That doesn't help you here." "I know." Her tone was sharper now. Not angry exactly. Defensive. Graham recognized it. He had used the same tone whenever someone offered advice he had not requested. He looked at his key ring. It held 8 keys, a small flashlight, and a steel loop that opened with a screw. "I may have something that will hold until you get home," he said. "Would you like me to try?" The woman touched the broken snap with her thumb. "Will it be safe? It won't be pretty, but it should be strong." "Pretty isn't one of my requirements." There was a trace of humor in her voice. Graham smiled. "Then I may be qualified." He removed the steel loop from his keys and fed it through the ring on Mabel's collar. Then he attached the remaining end of the leash and tightened the small screw. He pulled it twice to make certain it would hold. "This should get you home." The woman tested it herself. "You carry repair parts on your keys?" "I manage buildings for the Portland Library System. Things break." "And you fix them?" "Usually. Even when no one asks?" Graham looked at her. The corner of her mouth lifted slightly. "Sometimes," he admitted. "That sounds dangerous." "It has been." She held out her hand, not toward him, but into the space between them. "I'm Elise Rowan." Graham accepted it. Graham Mercer. Her handshake was firm. "And this is Mabel," she said, "although I suppose you've already met." Mabel stood quietly beside her now. To anyone arriving at that moment, nothing would have seemed unusual. But Graham had seen her in the bicycle lane. He had seen the way she froze. "How far do you have to go?" he asked. "About 6 blocks. "I can walk with you." Elise withdrew her hand. "Mabel knows the way." "I'm sure she does." "Then why would you need to come?" Graham heard the challenge in the question. He could have said the broken leash might fail. He could have pointed out the bicycles, the wet path, or the dog's fear. He could have produced 6 practical reasons before Elise finished turning away. Instead, he said, "I don't need to." That stopped her. Graham continued, "But I'm walking in that direction. If you'd prefer company, I'd be glad to join you." "And if I wouldn't?" "I'll go the other way." For a moment, Elise said nothing. Then she adjusted her grip on the harness. "The other way is probably more interesting." "I was afraid of that." This time she smiled fully. "Thank you for helping Mabel, Graham." "You're welcome." Elise gave the dog a command. Mabel stepped forward. Her first movements were slow, but after several yards, she settled into a familiar rhythm. Elise followed with one hand resting lightly on the harness handle. Graham watched them move away. He told himself there was no reason to remain there. The leash was secure. The dog had recovered. Elise did not want company, and she had made that clear, without being unkind. He turned toward the river. Something dark lay beneath the bench. A leather glove. Graham picked it up. It was small, lined with gray wool, and slightly damp from the pavement. He looked down the path. Elise and Mabel were already approaching the crossing near the playground. Graham slipped the glove into his coat pocket and started after them. He did not call immediately. He stayed far enough behind that Mabel would not be distracted, waiting until they reached the end of the bicycle path. "Elise?" She stopped. Mabel turned first. Graham slowed as he approached. "You dropped a glove?" Elise touched her coat pockets. The left one? Graham checked. Yes. Then you've rescued everything I brought to the park. Not everything. What did I forget? To let me walk in the other direction. She laughed. It was a quiet sound, brief but unguarded. Graham placed the glove in her open hand. Thank you. You're welcome. He expected her to leave again. Instead, she ran her fingers over the leather and asked, Are you always in this park on Friday mornings? Not always. That wasn't an invitation. I didn't think it was. It was a question. Then the answer is no. I had the morning off. From fixing libraries? From trying to. Elise put on the glove. A breeze moved through the trees, shaking water from the branches. Somewhere beyond the playground, a maintenance truck reversed with a series of mechanical beeps. Mabel flinched. It was a small movement. Elise might not have noticed if her hand had not been resting on the harness. But it was enough to erase her smile. She crouched beside the Labrador. Mabel? The dog's breathing had changed. It came quickly now, although she had barely walked 100 yards. Elise placed one hand against her chest. You're all right, she whispered. We're going home. Graham remained several steps away. He knew he should leave. Elise had thanked him twice. She had declined his company. Anything more would become the kind of help that served the helper more than the person receiving it. Still, something about the dog troubled him. Mabel was working again. She stood correctly beside Elise. Her harness was steady, her head facing forward, but her legs were trembling. Elise seemed to feel it too. Her hand moved slowly along the dog's neck until it reached the unfamiliar steel loop Graham had attached to the collar. For several seconds, she held it between her fingers. Then she lowered her face near Mabel's head. Her next words were so quiet that Graham knew they were not meant for him. You've never left me before. Mabel leaned against her, and Graham realized Elise was not only frightened by what had happened, she was frightened that it might happen again. 4 days later, Graham heard a woman say his name before he saw her. Graham Mercer. He stopped on the park path. Elise was sitting on the same green bench where they had met. Mabel lay beside her, no longer wearing her working harness. The red leash was attached to a new metal clip. Graham looked around. There were joggers near the river, a man pushing a stroller, and 2 women walking beneath the trees. None of them seemed to know him. Elise turned her face in his direction. You can stop looking for whoever told me you were here. How did you know? Your keys. Graham glanced down. The ring clipped to his belt held 7 keys now instead of 8. They struck one another softly whenever he walked. You remembered that sound? You carry enough metal to open a prison. I manage 9 library buildings, which explains why you walk like a janitor in a ghost story. Graham smiled. You make me sound memorable. You sound memorable. I have no opinion about the rest yet. Mabel lifted her head at his voice. Graham stayed several feet away. Is she working? Not while we're sitting. May I say hello? Elise reached down and removed the harness completely. Now you may. Graham crouched and offered the back of his hand. Mabel sniffed it, then rested her chin against his fingers. She seemed calmer than she had 4 days earlier. But when a bicycle bell rang somewhere behind them, her head rose immediately. Graham felt her body tense. Elise reached for the harness. She's been doing that since Friday. Reacting to bicycles, to sudden sounds. She had a bad fright. She has heard louder noises than that: construction equipment, fire alarms, a car accident 3 feet from us. Mabel lowered her head again, but her attention remained fixed on the path. Graham sat at the far end of the bench. "Have you spoken to anyone about it?" Elise's hand became still on Mabel's back. "She has an appointment." "When?" "Tomorrow." Graham waited, expecting her to say more. She did not. A group of children passed them carrying paper bags from a bakery. Mabel ignored the food. Her nose moved once, but she did not lift her head. Graham watched her. She's very disciplined. She's better behaved than most people I know. Does that include me? I don't know you well enough. That sounds hopeful. It wasn't. But she was smiling again. The wind carried the smell of wet earth from the flower beds. Portland had been raining since Sunday, and the ground beneath the trees was dark with water. Drops continued to fall from the branches even though the sky had cleared. Graham had spent the morning inspecting damage from a leaking pipe at the Woodstock Library. He still had a yellow measuring tape in his coat pocket and a streak of white plaster on one sleeve. Elise tilted her head. "You smell like wet drywall." Graham looked at his coat. "I'm going to pretend that's a compliment." "It isn't an insult, just information. One of the branch libraries had a leaking pipe. Did you fix it?" "The plumber fixed the pipe. I stood nearby and explained why the ceiling shouldn't be full of water." "An essential public service." "I thought so." Mabel rose. Elise felt the movement and picked up the harness. Once it was secured, the dog's posture changed immediately. Her head lifted and her body became more alert. Elise stood. "We should keep moving." Graham rose too. "Would you prefer the interesting direction today?" "You mean the one without you?" "That was my understanding." Elise placed her hand on the harness handle. "You can walk with us as far as the rose garden." Graham looked down the path. "That's in the opposite direction from the parking lot." "I know." He wondered whether she was teasing him or testing him. Probably both. All right. They began walking. Graham stayed on Elise's right, half a step behind. He had spent part of the weekend reading about guide dogs. Almost every source said the same thing. Do not touch the harness, do not give commands, and do not distract the dog while it is working. What the articles had not explained was how close he should walk, or whether he should mention branches, puddles, and people approaching from the other direction. When they reached a shallow puddle, Graham opened his mouth. Mabel guided Elise around it before he could speak. "You almost warned me," Elise said. "How did you know?" "You inhaled." "I do that fairly often." "Not like that." "What did it sound like?" "Like a man about to explain something." Graham put his hands in his coat pockets. "I was going to mention the puddle. Mabel saw it." "I know." "Do you?" "I'm learning." Elise was silent for several steps. "That's a better answer than most people give." What do they usually say? That they were only trying to help, aren't they? Usually. But good intentions don't make it pleasant when a stranger grabs your arm and pulls you across a street you weren't planning to cross. People do that? Last month, a man dragged me into a coffee shop. Why? He thought it was a bus stop. Graham laughed before he could stop himself. Elise turned toward him. You're allowed to laugh. It was funny after I found the door. What did the man say? He left before I could thank him for the coffee I didn't buy. They continued along the path. The rose garden was nearly empty. Summer had ended, and most of the flowers had begun to fade. Gardeners were cutting away damaged stems and clearing leaves from the gravel walkways. Graham realized Elise could smell the roses before he could. Her expression changed as they approached. My mother used to bring me here, she said. When you were a child? Every October. She liked the garden better after the crowds disappeared. Did you grow up in Portland? Mostly. We moved here when I was 9. From where? Boise. Do you miss it? I miss what I remember. That isn't always the same thing. Mabel stopped at the edge of a short flight of steps. Elise found the first step with one foot. The dog waited until she was balanced, then moved down carefully. Graham followed. At the bottom, Elise asked, What do you do when you aren't carrying replacement parts through public parks? Work, read, cook badly. That sounds like 3 forms of work. It often feels that way. Family? The question was casual, but Graham felt his left hand move toward the place where his wedding ring had once been. Divorced. How long? 3 years. I'm sorry. People usually say congratulations. Do you want me to? No. Then I won't. Graham looked at her. Most people asked what had happened next. Elise did not. She allowed the answer to remain exactly as large as he had made it. What about you? He asked. I'm not divorced. He waited. She smiled faintly. That is the complete answer you've earned. Fair enough. They reached a gravel path where the sound of Mabel's steps changed. Elise's free hand moved lightly at her side. What kind of work do you do? Graham asked. I make people angry. Professionally? Mostly. What does that involve? I test websites and mobile applications for accessibility. Banks, hospitals, insurance companies, online stores. You tell them what doesn't work. I tell them their beautiful new application becomes useless when someone navigates it with a screen reader. And that makes them angry? Only when they paid a great deal of money for it. What does a screen reader do? It converts what is displayed on a computer or phone into speech or braille output. But it can only interpret what the developers have built correctly. If a button isn't labeled, I may hear button without knowing whether it pays a bill or closes the account. Graham considered that. So, you find things that are broken? Yes. And tell people how to repair them? Yes. You're me with better technology. Elise shook her head. No, I ask before I fix the cabinet. He laughed. Mabel's pace slowed as they approached another set of steps. This time, she stopped several feet too early. Elise gave the command again. Mabel moved forward, then hesitated. Graham saw the dog shift her weight away from her left front leg. "Is something wrong?" he asked. Elise crouched. "What did you see?" "She may be favoring one leg." Elise ran both hands carefully over Mabel's shoulders and front legs. The dog did not pull away. "You're tired," Elise whispered. "She doesn't seem to be in pain." "That isn't what I asked." Graham heard the fear returning. He knelt several feet away. "No," he said, "it isn't." Elise remained beside Mabel. Her phone began to ring. She took it from her coat pocket and touched the screen. A synthetic voice announced the caller. "Rose City Veterinary Hospital." Elise stood immediately. "I need to take this." "I'll wait by the gate." "You don't have to." "I know." Graham moved far enough away to give her privacy. He could not hear every word, and he tried not to listen. He watched two gardeners load branches into a small electric cart. Beyond them, clouds were gathering over the hills. Elise's voice carried across the empty garden. "Yes, tomorrow at 10 is fine." A pause. "No, she hasn't fallen." Another pause. "She was startled on Friday. She ran into a bicycle lane." The gardener started the cart. Graham heard only fragments after that. Evaluation. Reaction time. Joint examination. Then one word that made Elise turn away from him. Retirement. The call ended. For a long moment, she stood without moving. Mabel pressed against her leg. Graham waited. Finally, Elise walked toward him. "Everything all right?" "No." The honesty of the answer surprised him. She tightened her grip on the harness. "The veterinarian wants to evaluate whether Mabel should continue working." Graham looked at the Labrador. "How old is she?" 10. "How long has she been with you?" "Almost 8 years." He understood why the question hurt before he asked it. "What happens if she can't work?" Elise's face became unreadable. "She retires." "Would she stay with you?" "I don't know." "You don't have to decide today." "No. Tomorrow, someone will tell me how much time I have left before I do." A cold drop of rain struck Graham's cheek. Then another. People near the garden entrance began opening umbrellas. Graham offered his arm but did not move it closer. "Elise!" She seemed to know what he was offering. After a moment, she placed her hand lightly above his elbow. Mabel remained on her other side. They walked toward the covered entrance without speaking. Beneath the stone archway, Elise released his arm. Rain swept across the garden, soft at first and then heavy enough to blur the empty paths. Mabel lay at her feet. Graham thought about the dog in the bicycle lane, about Elise's hand searching the empty bench, about the words she had whispered when she believed he was too far away to hear. "You've never left me before." Elise stood with her face turned toward the rain. Then she asked, "Have you ever had to say goodbye to someone who was still going to be alive?" Graham thought of his former wife packing the last box from their bedroom. He thought of standing in the driveway while she placed it in her car. "Yes," he said. Elise turned toward his voice. "Does that make it easier?" "No." The rain filled the silence between them. "But it means you don't have to explain why it hurts." Elise lowered one hand until it rested on Mabel's head. For the first time since they had met, she did not tell Graham that she could manage alone. At 9:20 the next morning, Elise called Graham and asked if he could drive her to the veterinary hospital. She did not begin with hello. My ride canceled. Graham was standing in the basement of the Belmont Library, watching water drip into a blue bucket. What time is the appointment? 10. He checked his watch. I can be outside your building in 20 minutes. There was a short silence. You don't know where I live. That could be a problem. She gave him the address. Then she said, I'm asking for transportation, Graham, not moral support. Understood. And I will pay for parking. Now you're being unreasonable. She ended the call. Graham asked one of the maintenance technicians to supervise the leaking valve and hurried to his truck. Elise lived in a brick apartment building in northwest Portland, less than 2 miles from the park. She was waiting beneath the entrance canopy when he arrived. Mabel stood beside her in harness. The dog's head was high, but Graham noticed that she shifted her weight slowly when Elise gave the command to move. He stepped out and walked around the truck. Good morning. You're 3 minutes early. I can circle the block. That won't be necessary. Graham opened the passenger door. Before he could offer help, Elise found the door frame with one hand and the seat with the other. She directed Mabel into the footwell, folded the harness handle down, and climbed in. The entire process took less time than Graham usually needed to place a bag of groceries on the seat. He closed the door and returned to the driver's side. What kind of truck is this? Elise asked. A Ford Ranger. What year? 2014. That explains the smell. Graham started the engine. What smell? Coffee, sawdust, and something electrical? The electrical smell is probably the heated seat. Should I be concerned? Only if it starts working. As they pulled away from the curb, Elise rested one hand on Mabel's shoulders. She had joked about the truck, but her fingers had not stopped moving since Graham arrived. Rose City Veterinary Hospital occupied the ground floor of a modern building near the river. Graham parked, guided Elise to the entrance after she accepted his arm, and then allowed Mabel to take over. Inside, the waiting room smelled of disinfectant and dog treats. A terrier began barking from beneath a chair. Mabel ignored it. A receptionist greeted Elise by name. Dr. Patel will see you shortly. Elise sat in the nearest chair. Mabel lowered herself carefully at her feet. Graham remained standing. You can go, Elise said. I know. You have work. The library has survived without me for almost an hour. I asked for transportation. And you received it. You don't have to wait. Graham glanced toward the rain striking the front windows. I'm not staying because I have to. Elise turned her face toward him. Why are you staying? He could have said he was concerned about Mabel. It would have been true. He could have said Elise might need a ride home. That was also true. But he heard the question beneath the question. Because I'd like to know what happens. Elise considered his answer. Then she moved her coat from the chair beside her. Graham sat down. A veterinary technician led them to an examination room 10 minutes later. Dr. Annika Patel entered, carrying a tablet. She greeted Elise first, then crouched beside Mabel and allowed the dog to sniff her hand. "Tell me what happened in the park." Elise described the collision, the broken leash, and Mabel's failure to respond immediately. She did not mention how frightened she had been. Dr. Patel listened without interrupting. "Any other changes?" "She's slower on stairs," Elise said. "Sometimes she stops before a curb. She sleeps more." "For how long?" "A few months." Graham saw Elise's hand tighten around the leash. Dr. Patel examined Mabel's eyes, ears, heart, and joints. She asked the dog to walk across the room, turn, sit, and rise again. Mabel obeyed each command. But when she stood after sitting, she needed 2 attempts. Dr. Patel placed one hand beneath the dog's left shoulder. "There's some stiffness here and in both hips. Nothing unusual for her age, but discomfort can affect confidence and reaction time." "Can medication fix it?" Elise asked. "It can reduce the discomfort. Then she can keep working." Dr. Patel did not answer immediately. She sat on the low stool across from Elise. "Mabel's physical health is only part of the decision." "What is the other part?" "Whether she can still guide you safely and whether she still wants to work." "She does." "Elise, she brought me here." "Yes, and she did it well." "Then what are we discussing?" Dr. Patel's voice remained gentle. "We're discussing the fact that a dog can perform a familiar route and still be approaching the end of her working life." Mabel placed her head on Elise's knee. Dr. Patel continued, "The incident in the park may have been an isolated response to a frightening event. But combined with the hesitation you've noticed, the slower recovery, and the joint stiffness, I think we should involve your guide dog program." "They'll take her away." "No one is taking her today." "That isn't what I said." Graham looked toward the examination table. He understood then that Elise had been preparing for this conversation long before the broken leash. Dr. Patel moved closer. "You will be involved in every decision. Retirement doesn't mean Mabel stops being part of your life. It means she stops being the reason I can have one." The room became silent. Mabel's tail moved once against the floor. Dr. Patel gave Elise time before answering. "No," she said, "it means the job has become too demanding for the dog who helped you build that life." Elise turned her face away. Dr. Patel recommended blood tests, anti-inflammatory medication, and a formal evaluation with a guide dog mobility instructor. She explained that retirement could happen gradually. Mabel might continue working on short, familiar routes while Elise prepared for another dog. There was no fixed date, no immediate separation, no stranger waiting outside to take Mabel away. But Graham could see that none of this comforted Elise. She heard only one word: retirement. While the technician collected a blood sample, Graham waited in the hall. Dr. Patel joined him a few minutes later. "You're a friend?" she asked. "We met last week." The veterinarian raised her eyebrows. "It has been an eventful week." "That's one way to describe it." "She may need support," I offered. "Offering once may not be enough." Graham looked through the small window in the examination room door. Elise sat with one hand on Mabel's back. I don't think she likes being asked twice. Then don't decide for her. Just make sure she knows the offer remains. The drive back was quiet. Elise sat angled toward the window. Mabel rested at her feet without moving. When they reached her apartment building, Graham parked but did not turn off the engine. Do you want me to walk you inside? No. All right. Elise reached for the door handle. The program will call this afternoon, she said. Graham waited. They'll probably arrange an instructor's visit. That sounds sensible. I don't need you to tell me it's sensible. You're right. She opened the door. Mabel climbed down slowly. Graham watched Elise unfold the harness handle and prepare to leave. Elise! She stopped. I'm sorry. For what? For trying to answer a question you didn't ask. The tension in her face softened, but only slightly. You do that often. I've been told. By your former wife? Yes. Elise stood beside the open truck door. What else did she tell you? That I could repair everything except the reason she was leaving. That sounds rehearsed. I've had 3 years. Did you ever ask what she meant? Graham looked through the windshield. I thought I knew. That isn't what I asked. No, he said, I never asked. Elise closed the truck door. Graham watched her enter the building with Mabel. He returned to work and spent the afternoon solving problems that had clear causes. A valve needed replacement. A damaged ceiling tile needed to be removed. A contractor had delivered the wrong size pipe. Each problem could be measured. Each one had a correct tool and a visible result. By 5:30, the leak had stopped. Graham drove home to a narrow 2-story house on a quiet street in Selwood. The house had once belonged to his parents. After his father died and his mother moved to Arizona, Graham bought it from them. His former wife had never liked the kitchen cabinets. One door still hung slightly lower than the others. For 3 years, Graham had told himself he would repair it. That evening, he stood in the kitchen and looked at the uneven door. Then his phone rang. Elise's name appeared on the screen. He answered immediately. How is Mabel? The blood tests were normal. That's good. Yes, but the guide dog program is sending an instructor next Thursday. Graham pulled out a chair and sat down. What happens then? They watch us work. Familiar streets, unfamiliar streets, traffic, stairs. They evaluate her speed, attention, and decision-making. And after that, they make a recommendation, not a decision. Elise was silent for a moment. A recommendation I'll have to live with. In the background, Graham heard Mabel's collar move. Are you alone? I'm blind, Graham, not unattended luggage. He closed his eyes. That came out wrong. It usually does when people ask that question. What should I have asked? Another pause. Whether I wanted company. Graham looked at the empty chair across from him. Would you like company? Not tonight. All right. But I may need something tomorrow. Tell me. The cabinet door is still broken. Graham smiled despite himself. And? And I may have been wrong about only the cabinet. The call ended before he could ask what she meant. The cabinet door was not the only broken thing in Elise Rowan's apartment. Graham discovered this within 7 minutes of arriving. The kitchen faucet dripped. A drawer scraped against its frame. One dining chair shifted whenever someone placed weight on the left side. He noticed all 3 problems. He mentioned none of them. Elise stood in the kitchen doorway with her arms folded. "You're being unusually quiet. I'm examining the cabinet. You looked at the faucet. It was in my field of vision. And the chair? It made a sound. The drawer?" Graham set his toolbox on the counter. "I may have glanced at the drawer." "You've been here 7 minutes. I work quickly." Mabel lay near the refrigerator without her harness. The medication Dr. Patel had prescribed appeared to be helping. She had risen more easily when Graham arrived, although she still walked with the careful dignity of an aging dog. Elise crossed the kitchen and found the edge of the counter. "The cabinet door is the only thing I asked you to repair." "I remember." "And you won't touch anything else?" "Not without permission." She pointed toward the loose chair. "That one is dangerous." Graham picked up the chair. "The back joint needs glue." "The faucet keeps me awake." "Probably the cartridge." "The drawer has been insulting me for 6 months." "I can speak to it." Elise tried not to smile. "You waited until I asked." "I'm capable of personal growth." "We've known each other for 8 days." "It has been an intense program." Graham opened the cabinet and examined the hinge. Elise remained beside him. Most people would have stepped away and allowed him to work. Instead, she asked what he was doing. "The upper hinge is loose," he explained. "One screw is stripped, so it no longer grips the wood." "Are you replacing it?" "I could, but I'm going to fill the old hole and use the same hinge." "Why?" "Because the hinge isn't broken. The wood around it has stopped holding." Elise ran her fingers along the edge of the door. "So the part that looks broken isn't the problem." "Usually isn't." She became quiet. Graham realized too late that they were no longer discussing the cabinet. He removed the hinge and searched his toolbox for a wooden dowel. "Can I ask you something?" Elise said. "You can ask." "How did your wife leave?" Graham's hand stopped inside the toolbox. "That isn't the question people usually ask." "What do they ask?" "Why she left." "I already know why." "You do?" "You fix things before people decide whether they want them fixed." Graham found the dowel and placed it on the counter. "That may have been part of it." "What was the rest?" He considered avoiding the question. Elise had earned very little of his history, just as he had earned very little of hers. But the previous evening she had admitted that something beyond the cabinet might be broken. Perhaps this was what she had meant. "She packed while I was at work," Graham said. "When I came home, there were 6 boxes in the hallway." "Did she tell you she was leaving?" "For months." "But you didn't believe her." "I believed the problems could be solved." "That wasn't my question." Graham looked at Elise. "No," he said, "I didn't believe her." Mabel raised her head, then lowered it again. "What did you do when you saw the boxes?" Elise asked. "I made a list." Elise's expression changed. A list of what? Counselors. Houses we could rent closer to her office. Vacations we could take. Things I could change. Did you ask her to stay? I thought the list meant that. It didn't. No. What did she want? Graham picked up the screwdriver. She wanted me to admit that I was frightened. Were you? Terrified? Did you tell her? Not until the car was packed. The cabinet door rested between them. Elise touched its upper corner. Maybe some things can only be repaired before they break. Graham looked at the lowered door. Maybe. He filled the damaged screw hole, reset the hinge, and rehung the cabinet. Elise tested it several times. It closes differently. Correctly. I didn't say that. Would you like me to put it back? No. He repaired the chair, adjusted the drawer, and replaced the faucet cartridge. Elise followed every step, asking what each tool did and how he knew which part had failed. She did not stand over him because she doubted his ability. She wanted to understand what was changing inside her home. When he finished, Graham returned each object to its original position. The coffee container went 8 inches to the right of the stove. The sugar bowl sat directly behind it. A cutting board remained upright against the wall with its handle facing left. Elise noticed when he moved the salt shaker 2 inches. Too far. Graham returned it. How did you know? I didn't have to search for it yesterday. He looked around the kitchen again. Small raised labels marked the oven controls. Rubber bands distinguished one jar from another. The knives were stored in a wooden block, always in the same order. What had seemed ordinary when he entered now appeared carefully designed. You know where everything is, he said. Usually. Does anyone else cook in here? My sister tries. What happens? She moves things. That sounds dangerous. It is when she puts a glass on the edge of the counter and forgets to tell me. Graham closed his toolbox. I assumed you needed things repaired because you couldn't see them. Elise leaned against the counter. And now? Now I think you knew about every problem before I did. Almost every problem. She turned toward the quiet faucet. Thank you. You're welcome. Mabel stood and walked toward the kitchen, her nails tapping softly across the floor. Elise checked the time on her phone. A synthetic voice announced 6:15. Have you eaten? Not since lunch. I was going to make pasta. Graham waited. Elise sighed. You're supposed to recognize an invitation without forcing me to identify it. I didn't want to repair your sentence. Stay for dinner, Graham. I'd like that. Elise cooked without assistance. She filled the pot by placing one finger just below the waterline. She used a talking kitchen scale to measure the pasta and identified spice jars by touch. Graham chopped vegetables after she asked him to. He described where he placed each one. They ate at the small dining table beside the window. Outside, traffic moved along the wet street, tires hissing across the pavement. Elise poured 2 glasses of wine. Were you born blind? Graham asked. No. He waited for her to continue. She turned the stem of her glass between her fingers. I was diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa when I was 19. At first I lost my night vision. Then my peripheral vision began narrowing. How long before? Before I became completely blind? Yes. Almost 9 years. Slowly enough to pretend it wasn't happening. Quickly enough that every year required a different life. Graham did not speak. Elise continued. I stopped driving at 24. I left my first job at 27 because their software was inaccessible. By 30, I could still see light and large shapes. Then even that disappeared. Do you remember colors? All of them. What did Mabel look like when you met her? Elise smiled. She was 3, black coat, brown eyes, a white mark under her chin that the trainer called an imperfection. Her smile faded. I watched her walk toward me. You could see her? Not clearly, but I could see enough to know she was coming. Mabel lay beneath the table. Elise lowered her hand until it found the dog's back. She is one of the last things I remember seeing. Graham understood then why another guide dog could never simply replace her. What else do you remember? He asked. My mother's red coat, the blue door of the house where I grew up, snow under a streetlight. Her fingers moved through Mabel's fur, and a man standing in my kitchen telling me he couldn't stay. Your fiancé? Elise nodded. His name was Jonathan. We were supposed to get married in June. My vision disappeared completely in February. Graham waited. He tried, she said. For 4 months, he tried to become the person he thought I needed. What happened? He began doing everything, choosing my clothes, ordering for me in restaurants, speaking to waiters as if I weren't there. He even answered questions at my medical appointments. That sounds familiar. Yes. The answer landed without cruelty. What did you do? Graham asked. I told him I didn't need another parent. And he left? Not immediately. First he told me how much he had sacrificed. Elise's voice remained calm, which made the words harder to hear. He said he couldn't spend the rest of his life being responsible for both of us. Graham looked at Mabel. What did you say? Nothing. Nothing? I was afraid that if I argued, he might stay out of guilt. The traffic outside grew louder as the rain intensified. So, I let him leave, Elise said. Then I spent several years proving he had been right about one thing. What thing? That needing someone gives them power over whether you get to keep them. Graham wanted to tell her Jonathan had been wrong. He wanted to say not every man would leave, but promises from a man she had known for 8 days would mean nothing. Instead, he asked, Is that why you didn't want me to wait at the veterinary hospital? I didn't want to become grateful. For a ride? For your presence. Graham looked down at his hands. Gratitude isn't a debt. It became one before. I'm not Jonathan. No. Elise turned toward him. But I don't know who you are yet. The following Thursday, the guide dog mobility instructor arrived. Her name was Teresa Alvarez. She had worked with guide dog teams across Oregon and Washington for 17 years. She observed Elise and Mabel on 3 routes. The first was the familiar walk from the apartment to a nearby grocery store. Mabel performed well. although her pace was slow. The second included stairs and an unfamiliar construction barrier. Mabel hesitated twice and required a repeated command. The third route crossed a wide intersection with turning traffic. Mabel stopped correctly at the curb. When Elise gave the forward command, the dog waited. A car turned across the crossing. Mabel had made the right decision. But after the car passed, she remained at the curb for several seconds, even after it was safe to proceed. Elise repeated the command. Mabel finally moved. Graham watched from half a block away. Elise had asked him to be there, but not to follow closely. He obeyed. Back at the apartment, Teresa sat across from Elise at the dining table. Mabel lay between them. "She still has good judgment," Teresa said, "and she knows your established routes. Then she can continue for a little while." "How long?" "I recommend retiring her from full-time work within 4 weeks." Elise's face went still. Teresa explained the options. Mabel could remain with Elise as a pet. She could live with a family member or trusted friend. If necessary, the organization could help arrange a retirement home. Meanwhile, Elise could apply for a successor dog and begin preparing for a new partnership. "You make it sound like replacing a phone," Elise said. "I know it doesn't feel that way." "No, you know what the procedure is. That isn't the same thing." Teresa accepted the words without defending herself. "You're right." Graham stood near the kitchen doorway. He saw Elise reach beneath the table until her hand found Mabel's collar. "What happens if I refuse?" she asked. "You have the right to make your own decision." "And if my decision is to keep working with her, then my responsibility is to tell you that the risk will continue to increase for both of you." Elise lowered her head. Mabel moved closer. Teresa placed several documents on the table, explained the next steps, and left. Graham waited until the apartment door closed. He did not offer a solution. He did not list the available options. He did not say that 4 weeks was still time. Elise sat in silence, holding the harness handle in one hand. Finally she said, "Everyone keeps telling me Mabel deserves to rest." "She does." "I know." Her voice broke on the second word. "That's what makes it worse." Graham sat in the chair beside her. He did not touch her. Elise reached down and removed Mabel's harness. Without it, the dog looked smaller, older. She rested her head in Elise's lap. For almost 8 years, Mabel had guided her through intersections, offices, airports, hospitals, grocery stores, and the first terrible months after Jonathan left. Elise pressed her face against the dog's neck. "I know how to work without my sight," she whispered. Graham remained silent. "I know how to live alone." Her hand tightened around Mabel's collar. "But I don't know who I am without her." For 3 days, Elise refused to discuss where Mabel would live after retirement. She completed the application for a new guide dog. She spoke to Teresa about training dates. She ordered a folding white cane to use during the transition. But whenever anyone mentioned Mabel's future, Elise changed the subject. On Sunday afternoon, her sister arrived with a solution. "Mabel can live with us," Caroline said. They were sitting in Elise's living room. Mabel slept on the rug between them, her chin resting on her front paws. Caroline Rowan was 5 years older than Elise. She lived across the river in Vancouver with her husband, 2 children, a golden retriever, and a cat that hated everyone. Elise held a mug of coffee in both hands. "You already have 2 animals. One of them is a cat. He contributes nothing. Mabel has never lived with children. Sam and Lucy know how to behave around dogs. Lucy is 6. She can learn." Elise turned toward the window. Rain tapped against the glass. Caroline continued, "You could visit whenever you wanted. You live 40 minutes away. 25 without traffic. There is always traffic. We would make it work." Elise heard the strain beneath her sister's confidence. Caroline meant every word. She would take Mabel, she would rearrange her house, manage 3 animals, educate the children, and drive Elise across the river whenever she asked. She would do it because she loved her sister, and within a month she would be exhausted. "No," Elise said. "Elise, it isn't fair to you. Let me decide what is fair to me. And let me decide what is right for Mabel." Caroline stood. "Then what are you going to do?" "I don't know." "The organization can place her with her puppy raiser." "I know." "She might be happy there." "I know." "You can't reject every option because none of them gives you exactly what you want." Elise set down her mug. "What do I want, Caroline?" "You want everything to stay the same." The answer filled the room. Mabel opened her eyes. Caroline lowered her voice. "And it can't." Elise turned her face away. Her sister gathered her coat. "The offer remains," Caroline said, "even if you're angry with me." "I'm not angry. You're furious." "I'm thinking. You think more loudly than anyone I know." After Caroline left, Elise sat on the floor beside Mabel. The dog rolled onto one side and allowed Elise to rub her chest. "You don't like the cat either," Elise whispered. Mabel's tail struck the rug once. Elise's phone rang. She expected Caroline. The screen reader announced Graham's name. She let it ring 3 times before answering. "Yes?" That sounded welcoming. "My sister was here." "How is Caroline?" Elise frowned. "How do you know her name?" "You mentioned her when I repaired the chair." "I did?" "She moves things in your kitchen." "You remember too much." "It's useful at work." "What do you want, Graham?" "I'm at the grocery store, and I have a question." "That sounds dangerous." "Do you recognize a good bottle of wine by touch?" "No, neither do I. That's the problem." Elise smiled despite herself. "Why are you buying wine?" "I was going to make dinner." "For whom?" "Myself." "Then buy the cheapest bottle. You won't complain." "I complain about my cooking constantly." "That's different. You know the cook." Graham lowered his voice. "I also thought you might like to come." Elise's hand rested on Mabel's side. "Why?" "Because eating alone is overrated." "You've done it for 3 years." "That's how I became qualified to judge." Elise hesitated. She did not want to leave the apartment. More precisely, she did not want to go anywhere that required her to pretend she was thinking about something other than Mabel. "Caroline offered to take her," she said. Graham became quiet. And? I said no. Why? 2 children, another dog, a hostile cat, too much noise. Would Mabel be unsafe? No. Unhappy? I don't know. Then what are you afraid of? Elise stood. I didn't call you for an interrogation. You didn't call me at all. That is not an improvement. You're right. Graham paused. Come to dinner. You can tell me to mind my own business in person. An hour later, he picked them up. Graham's house stood on a quiet street lined with maples and modest homes built decades earlier. Elise heard wind moving through branches and the distant ringing of a bicycle bell. Mabel hesitated at the unfamiliar front steps. Graham did not reach for Elise. He described the entrance instead. 3 concrete steps, metal railing on your left, the door opens inward. Elise found the railing. Inside, the house smelled of roasted vegetables, old wood, and coffee. Mabel explored slowly after Elise removed her harness. Her nails moved from hardwood to a woven rug, then back again. How large is this room? Elise asked. About 14 feet by 18. Furniture? Sofa against the wall to your right. Coffee table in the center. 2 chairs near the window. Edges? Mostly rounded. Mostly. The table has corners. Then it has edges. I'll notify the manufacturer. Graham guided her through the house by description, not touch. The kitchen was at the back. A narrow hallway led to a small office and the stairs. Beyond the kitchen, a door opened into a fenced yard. When Graham opened it, Mabel stepped outside. Elise stood in the doorway, listening. The dog moved across wet grass. Her collar jingled. She sniffed along the fence, sneezed, and continued toward a large tree. She's wagging her tail, Graham said. Mabel found a fallen branch and carried it back. Elise crouched. You haven't picked up a stick in years. Mabel placed it at her feet. Graham watched Elise run both hands along the damp piece of wood. Does your sister have a yard? He asked. Yes. How does Mabel get along with her dog? She tolerates him. And the children? She likes Sam. Lucy moves too quickly. Graham nodded. What about the puppy raiser? Elise's expression tightened. Mabel lived with a family in Idaho before her training. They've offered to take her back. Would that be a good home? Yes, but too far away. 6 hours by car. Graham looked at Mabel. What about staying with you? My apartment allows 2 service animals during the transition, but after Mabel retires, she becomes a pet under the lease. Could you request an accommodation? Possibly. That isn't the only problem. What else? 2 large dogs in 600 square feet, separate feeding routines, veterinary appointments, exercise, and Finn. She stopped. Graham noticed the name. Finn? The dog they may match me with. When did you find out? This afternoon. What do you know about him? 2 years old, yellow Labrador, fast-paced, confident in heavy traffic, apparently too interested in stolen socks. Graham smiled. He sounds dangerous. I haven't agreed to the match. But you remembered everything they said? Elise turned toward the yard. Mabel had found a patch of sunlight breaking through the clouds. She lowered herself onto the grass. Graham saw the answer before he understood the question. His house was quiet. The yard was secure. Mabel already seemed comfortable, and he lived 12 minutes from Elise's apartment. She could stay here, he said. Elise did not move. Graham continued carefully. After she retires? No, you haven't thought about it. I don't need to. You could visit whenever you wanted. No bridge traffic, no children, no other animals. No. Why? Because you barely know me. I know Mabel. You met her 9 days ago. She seems trustworthy. This isn't funny. I'm not joking. Elise stepped back into the kitchen. Graham followed, but kept his distance. You work all day, she said. I can adjust my schedule. She needs medication. I can give medication. She may develop arthritis. She'll need regular veterinary care. I understand. No, you don't. Then explain it. Elise turned toward his voice. You think you're offering a yard and a food bowl. You're offering to become responsible for a living animal for the rest of her life. I know. And what happens when this stops feeling meaningful? The question was not about Mabel. Graham leaned against the counter. I don't know what will happen between you and me. Nothing is happening. All right. That isn't what I meant. I know. Elise's hands closed at her sides. Graham spoke quietly. I'm not offering because I expect anything from you. Everyone expects something. Then expect me to care for the dog. Why would you? He looked through the open door. Mabel slept beneath the tree. Because she needs a home. Because I have one. Because I like her. That isn't enough. It may be enough for today. Elise shook her head. You always do this. Do what? Find the broken thing in the room and try to repair it. Yes. Graham considered denying it. Instead, he said, Then don't let me make the decision. She became still. Let Mabel stay here for one night. You can see how she handles the house. I can see what caring for her actually involves. Tomorrow, you take her home. And after that, you decide whether we ever discuss it again. Elise listened to Mabel breathing in the yard. One night, she said. One night. And you call if she becomes anxious. I will. If she refuses food, I'll call. If she paces, cries, scratches the door, or searches for me, I'll call. Elise swallowed. She sleeps beside my bedroom door. Then I'll put her bed beside mine. They prepared the house before dinner. Graham drove them to a pet supply store. Elise chose a bed by pressing both hands into the padding. They bought bowls, senior dog food, a rubber-backed mat, and a small ramp for the back steps. At the house, Graham moved the coffee table after Elise pointed out that Mabel might strike its corners in the dark. He placed non-slip runners in the hallway and locked the side gate. Elise walked through every room with Mabel. She showed Graham how to give the medication. She explained feeding times, bathroom routines, hand signals, verbal commands, and the difference between Mabel's working harness and ordinary leash. At dinner, neither of them spoke about the following morning. By 9, the rain had stopped. Graham drove Elise home. Mabel remained at his house. It was the first time in almost 8 years that Elise had entered her apartment without hearing the dog behind her. Graham walked her to the building entrance. "Do you want me to come upstairs?" "No." He placed her hand on the cold metal door handle after she asked. "I'll call before you go to bed," he said. "I may not answer." "All right. And don't let her sleep on your bed." "I won't." "She'll try. I'll remain strong." Elise entered the building. The elevator carried her to the 4th floor. She counted 12 steps from the elevator to her door, unlocked it, and went inside. Silence met her. No collar, no pause, no soft breath, waiting for the command to enter. Elise folded her cane and placed it on the console table. "Mabel, kitchen." The words left her mouth before she remembered. Nothing moved. She stood alone in the center of the apartment. Then she lowered herself to the floor and pressed both hands against the empty place where Mabel should have been. For the first time since losing her sight, Elise did not cry, because she could no longer see the room around her. She cried because she could hear every part of it. At 6:14 the next morning, Elise called Graham and told him she was coming to take Mabel home. Graham was standing in the backyard in slippers and an old coat, holding a wet tennis ball. Mabel waited beneath the maple tree. "She slept through the night," he said. "That isn't why I'm calling." "She ate breakfast." "Graham, she took her medication, went outside twice, and tried to steal one of my shoes. I'll be there in 20 minutes. The call ended. Graham looked at Mabel. "You heard her." Mabel dropped the ball at his feet. "You don't appear concerned." She nudged it with her nose. Graham threw it across the yard. Mabel ran after it, not with the speed of a young dog, but with an easy movement he had not seen when she was working. She picked up the ball and carried it to a patch of wet grass. At 6:37, a rideshare vehicle stopped in front of the house. Elise stepped out with her folded white cane. Graham opened the gate. "You said 20 minutes. The driver missed the turn. Good morning to you, too. Where is she?" "In the yard." Elise moved quickly along the walkway. Graham described the 2 steps leading to the back door, but she barely slowed. "Mabel?" The Labrador lifted her head. Her collar rang softly as she crossed the patio. Elise crouched just as Mabel reached her. The dog pushed her nose beneath Elise's arm and began licking her face. "You're wet," Elise said. Mabel's tail struck the side of the house. "You smell terrible." The tail moved faster. Elise buried both hands in the dog's coat. "I'm taking you home." Graham stood in the doorway. He had expected the words. Still, they disappointed him more than they should have. "I'll get her bed," he said. Elise turned toward him. "You aren't going to argue?" "You said you're taking her home." "I thought you would explain why that was a mistake." "It isn't my decision. What do you think?" Graham looked at Mabel. "I think she was comfortable here." "That isn't what I asked." "I think you had a terrible night." Elise stood. And taking her home may make tonight easier." "Then you agree?" "No." Her expression hardened. Graham continued before she could respond. "I think you came because you were lonely, not because Mabel was unhappy. The backyard became quiet. Mabel carried the tennis ball to Elise and placed it against her shoe. Elise reached down and found it. Did she play with this? For most of the morning. She hasn't chased a ball in months. She didn't have a yard. I took her to the park. In her harness? Usually. That was work. Elise held the wet ball. Graham stepped back into the kitchen. I'll pack her things. He collected the medication, food, bowls, and leash. He folded the new bed and carried everything toward the front door. Elise followed him inside. Mabel did not. Elise stopped when she realized the dog's collar was no longer moving behind her. Mabel! The Labrador remained beside the back door, looking into the yard. Elise called again. Mabel walked inside slowly. Graham placed the bag near the entrance. Everything is here. Elise found the leash. She attached it to Mabel's collar and stood without moving. Do you want coffee? Graham asked. No. All right. Maybe. Graham poured 2 cups. They sat at the kitchen table. Mabel lay between them with the tennis ball still beside her front paws. Elise wrapped both hands around the warm mug. She didn't search for me. She stood by the front door for about 5 minutes. And then she went to sleep. That's all. At 3 a.m, she put her nose on my bed. I told you she would try to get in. She wasn't trying to get in. She was checking whether I was still there. Elise lowered her head. What did you do? I put my hand on her collar. And she went back to sleep. Elise turned toward the dog. I thought she would cry. I think she knew you were coming back. How? Graham looked at the leash in her hand. Maybe 8 years is long enough to trust someone for one night. Elise's fingers loosened. They remained at the table for almost an hour. When she finally stood, she did not pick up the bag. Could we try another night? She asked. Yes. And then another? If you want. I don't know what I want. Then we don't have to name it yet. Elise found Mabel's head and kissed the top of it. I'll come this evening. Graham walked her to the front door. Before leaving, she handed him the leash. It was the first thing she had ever trusted him to hold. The one-night trial became 3 nights, then a week. Elise visited every day. Sometimes she stayed for dinner. Sometimes she sat in the yard while Mabel slept against her feet. Once she arrived with her laptop and worked at Graham's kitchen table while he repaired a broken window latch. The arrangement changed Mabel. Without the harness, she became more playful. She carried sticks through the yard, rolled on the living room rug, and waited beside the refrigerator whenever Graham opened it. She also slept more. Elise began to understand that the dog's tiredness was not a failure. Mabel had been working for almost 8 years. She had earned the right to wake without being responsible for every curb, staircase, doorway, and moving car. 3 weeks after the evaluation, Teresa returned to complete the retirement paperwork. They met at Graham's house. Elise sat on the living room floor with Mabel beside her. Graham remained near the window. Teresa explained each document before Elise signed electronically. When everything was complete, Teresa asked for the working harness. It belonged to the guide dog organization and had to be returned after Mabel's retirement. Elise held it across her knees. The leather had softened beneath her hands over the years. She knew every scratch in the handle and every worn place along the straps. "I remember the first time they put this in my hand," she said. Teresa sat across from her. "What do you remember? I thought it felt too small." "The harness?" "The connection." Elise ran her fingers along the handle. "I was supposed to trust a dog through traffic because of one narrow piece of leather." "And did you?" "Not at first." Mabel rested her head in Elise's lap. "Then one day we were crossing Southwest Broadway. A delivery truck came out of an alley. I gave the forward command, and she refused." Teresa smiled. "Intelligent disobedience." "I was angry with her for 3 seconds. Then I heard the truck." Elise swallowed. "That was the first time I understood she wasn't obeying me. She was protecting both of us." She removed the harness for the last time. Mabel stood. For a moment, Elise's hands remained suspended where the handle had been. Graham brought the ordinary blue collar they had chosen. Attached to it was the small steel loop from his key ring. Elise found it immediately. "You kept this. It still works. You could replace it." "I could?" She smiled faintly. "Of course you could." Together, they fastened the blue collar around Mabel's neck. Teresa folded the working harness and placed it in her bag. "That's it?" Elise asked. "That's it." No ceremony, no announcement. Nothing in the room changed except the object around Mabel's neck. Yet the dog who had entered the house as Elise's guide now stood there as an ordinary animal, a retired dog, a friend without a job. Teresa left shortly afterward. Elise remained on the floor. Graham sat beside her, leaving space between them. "I thought it would feel like losing her," Elise said. "How does it feel?" "Like she's still here, but the part of our life that made sense is gone." Mabel pushed the tennis ball toward her. Elise picked it up. "Maybe it made more sense to her than it did to you," Graham said. "What do you mean?" "She worked when the harness was on. She plays when it's off. She seems to understand the difference." "And I don't." "You've had less practice." Elise threw the ball toward the hallway. It struck the wall. Mabel retrieved it anyway. That evening, Elise suggested a walk. She used her white cane. Graham held Mabel's leash. It was the first time they had gone out together without Elise's hand on the harness. The cane swept from side to side, locating curbs and obstacles. Her pace was slower than it had been with Mabel, but she moved with confidence. Graham walked beside her. Mabel stopped often to smell wet leaves, tree trunks, and the base of every mailbox. "She never did that while working," Graham said. "She wasn't supposed to. She has been keeping a great deal of curiosity under control. She once walked past an entire tray of hamburgers someone dropped outside a restaurant. I would have failed. So would I." They reached the park shortly before sunset. The green bench was empty. Elise touched its wooden back and recognized the place. This is where you decided I needed rescuing. I rescued Mabel. You repaired the leash with a temporary solution. It has lasted 3 weeks. I build durable temporary solutions. They sat. Mabel lay beside Graham, no longer between them. The park was quieter than on the day they met. No children raced along the bicycle path. No one shouted. Elise turned her face toward the river. What does the sky look like? Graham looked up. Gray. That is not a description. Dark gray near the hills. Lighter over the river. There's a narrow strip of orange below the clouds. What kind of orange? He thought about it. The color inside a candle flame. Elise smiled. That's better. Graham described the wet leaves reflecting the last light. He told her about a boy in red boots jumping into a puddle and a woman trying unsuccessfully to prevent a small dog from carrying an enormous branch. Elise listened with her hands folded in her lap. When Graham stopped speaking, she asked, Do you do this for everyone? Describe sunsets? Notice things? No. Why me? He could not answer without moving into territory neither of them had named. Because you ask. That isn't the only reason. No. Elise turned toward him. Graham was close enough to see the faint scar above her right eyebrow and the way the wind moved a strand of hair across her cheek. He lifted his hand, then stopped. May I? May you what? Move your hair. Elise's breath changed. Yes. Graham brushed the strand away from her face. His fingers rested against her cheek for a second longer than necessary. Elise did not move back. Neither did he. When he kissed her, it was gentle and brief. He pulled away first. Mabel slept beside the bench, unaware that anything had changed. Elise touched her lower lip. Was that gratitude? She asked. No. Pity? Of course not. The answer came too quickly. Graham heard it. So did she. Elise's expression closed. Then tell me something. All right. What do you love about me that has nothing to do with what I need? The word love struck him harder than the question. Graham opened his mouth. He thought of her humor, her intelligence, the way she heard uncertainty hidden inside ordinary sentences, the courage it took to release the harness she had held for 8 years. But beneath all of those answers was another truth. He liked being the person she called, the person who drove her, the person who repaired her cabinet and gave Mabel a home. For the first time, Graham wondered whether Elise was right to distrust what he felt. She waited, and he could not give her an answer he was certain was true. Graham's answer came several seconds too late. I don't know. Elise remained beside him on the park bench. You don't know what you love about me? I don't know whether I can separate what I feel from being useful to you. The honesty hurt more than a lie would have. Elise stood and unfolded her cane. I should go home. I'll drive you. No, Elise, you said you didn't know. I'm not punishing you for telling the truth. It feels like you are. I'm giving both of us time to understand it. She reached down and touched Mabel's head. Take care of her. I will. Elise walked away alone. Graham remained on the bench with the retired dog beside him. He did not follow. 3 days later, Elise traveled to the guide dogs for the blind campus in Boring, Oregon. The trip took less than an hour, but when the vehicle passed through the campus gates, she felt as if she had left one life and entered another. She had brought Mabel there years earlier for follow-up visits. The sounds were familiar. Dogs barking in distant kennels, doors opening onto concrete walkways, instructors calling commands across the training routes. This time, Mabel was not beside her. Elise used her white cane while Teresa guided her to a private room. The matching team reviewed your pace, home environment, travel patterns, and work, Teresa said. We still believe Finn is a strong match. You said he moves quickly. He does. How quickly? You'll find out tomorrow. Does he have any weaknesses besides stolen socks? He is young, confident, sometimes too interested in what comes next. That sounds like a polite description of impatience. It is. Elise set her suitcase beside the bed. Does he know anything about me? He knows someone is coming. That isn't the same thing. No, Teresa said. The rest of it you'll learn together. The following morning, Elise waited in a quiet training room. She heard the door open. A dog entered at a quick, controlled pace. His nails clicked across the floor, then stopped several feet away. Elise held out one hand. Finn approached. His nose touched her fingers. He sniffed her sleeve, her shoes, and the pocket where she kept treats. Then he sat so close that one of his front paws rested on the toe of her boot. Elise smiled. You don't believe in personal space? Finn leaned against her knee. His coat felt different from Mabel's, shorter, denser. His body was lean, and energy seemed to move through him even while he sat. Teresa handed Elise the harness. The leather was stiff, unmarked, no scratches beneath her fingers, no softened places shaped by years of use. Elise found the handle. It felt too small, exactly as Mabel's had once felt. Ready? Teresa asked. No. That's an acceptable place to begin. Their first route remained inside the campus. Finn moved as soon as Elise gave the forward command. She nearly lost her balance. Too fast, she said. Teresa instructed her to shorten her stride and communicate through the harness. Finn slowed for several yards, then accelerated again. At the first doorway, he stopped correctly but at a different angle from Mabel. Elise reached toward the wrong side and struck the frame with her hand. At the stairs, Finn placed his front paws on the first step instead of stopping several inches before it. At the final turn, Elise gave a command too late, and he continued forward. Nothing dangerous happened, but by the end of the route, her hand ached from gripping the harness. He doesn't listen, she said. He listens, Teresa replied. He doesn't know you yet. Mabel understood that command. Finn isn't Mabel. Elise released the handle. I know. But she had not known how much she would hate hearing it. Training continued for 10 days. Finn learned Elise's pace. Elise learned the way his shoulders shifted before an obstacle. She learned that he stopped abruptly for curbs, turned his head slightly before choosing a path around pedestrians, and sneezed whenever he became excited. He stole one sock on the third morning. On the fifth, he found an open closet and stole two. Elise began keeping her suitcase closed. They worked through downtown Portland, rode buses, entered stores, crossed light rail tracks, and navigated construction barriers. Finn performed well in heavy traffic. He remained calm when a siren passed. He ignored food on the sidewalk. But Elise compared every movement to Mabel. Mabel had slowed gently before a staircase. Finn stopped all at once. Mabel waited after a command. Finn moved immediately. Mabel checked Elise's position with a small turn of her head. Finn trusted her to follow. Every difference felt like evidence that the match was wrong. Graham called each evening. He never asked whether she needed him. Instead, he told her what Mabel had done. She carried one of my work gloves into the yard. Which one? The left? She prefers left gloves. You knew this? You didn't ask. He sent recordings of Mabel sleeping near the fireplace, walking through fallen leaves, and snoring beneath the kitchen table. Elise listened to each one more than once. She rarely spoke about Finn. When Graham asked directly, she gave short answers. He's fast. He likes socks. He stops correctly at curbs. On the 9th evening, Graham said, "You don't sound happy." "I'm tired." "That isn't what I said." She sat on the edge of the campus bed. Finn lay nearby, chewing a rubber toy. "I don't understand him." "You've known him 9 days." "I understood Mabel." "After 8 years. Not at the beginning." Graham waited. Elise ran one hand along the new harness. "It feels as if I'm betraying her." "By working with Finn?" "By allowing him to become important." "Mabel doesn't think that." "You don't know what she thinks." "No, but she has stolen my glove, taken over the best rug, and learned which neighbor carries treats. She isn't sitting by the door waiting for her old job." Elise knew he meant to comfort her. Instead, the words hurt. "I have to go." "Elise!" She ended the call. 2 days later, Elise and Finn completed the residential portion of their training. They returned to her apartment, where Teresa would continue working with them on local routes. Graham brought Mabel for a brief visit that evening. Elise heard his truck outside before the building's entry buzzer sounded. Finn was lying near the kitchen. The moment Mabel's collar rang in the hallway, he stood. Elise opened the apartment door. Mabel entered first. For several seconds, Elise forgot every instruction Teresa had given her. She dropped to her knees and wrapped both arms around the old dog. Mabel pushed against her chest, tail striking the wall. "You smell like his house," Elise whispered. Graham stood in the doorway, holding the leash. Finn approached. He sniffed Mabel cautiously. Mabel turned away, walked to her old place beside the refrigerator, and lay down as if she had never left. Finn followed. He tried to engage her in play, lowering his front legs and moving his tail. Mabel ignored him. Elise laughed for the first time since arriving at the campus. She never had patience for young dogs. "She has very little patience for me," Graham said. "That means she likes you." Graham looked toward Finn. "May I meet him?" "He isn't working." Graham crouched. Finn immediately pressed his nose into Graham's coat pocket. "He thinks you have food." "I don't." "He thinks everyone has food." Graham allowed Finn to sniff his hand. "You're faster than Mabel." Elise became still. "That isn't always a good thing." "I didn't say it was." "No, but everyone else does." Graham stood. He looked around the apartment. A new dog bed sat near Elise's bedroom. 2 bowls had replaced Mabel's old set. The folding cane rested on the console table. "You changed things," he said. "I had to." "How's he doing here?" "He hasn't found the sock drawer." "That's promising." "He missed the elevator this morning." "What happened?" "He turned toward the stairs." "Why?" "I don't know." "Did you ask Teresa?" "Yes." "What did she say?" "That I probably gave the command too early." Graham considered it. "Maybe you could mark the elevator button with something tactile." Elise's expression changed. "The button is already marked." "Then perhaps the floor." "Graham," he stopped. "I know where the elevator is." "I was only trying to—" "Help." "Yes." "I don't need you to redesign the building." Graham looked down. "You're right." The apology was immediate, but the damage remained. For the rest of the visit, they spoke about Mabel. Elise did not mention the kiss, neither did Graham. The following morning, Teresa joined Elise and Finn for their first neighborhood route. They walked from the apartment to a pharmacy 6 blocks away. Finn guided Elise around a delivery truck blocking half the sidewalk. He stopped correctly at 2 curbs and ignored a small dog barking from behind a fence. At the pharmacy entrance, Elise gave the command for the door. Finn moved toward a bench instead. "No," Elise said. "Find the door." Finn turned in a small circle. Elise repeated the command. Teresa intervened. "Stop." "He knows this." "He knows how to find a door. He may not know which door you want." "Mabel never had this problem." "Because Mabel knew you." "I'm giving the correct command." "You're giving 3 commands with your voice, your hand, and the direction of your body." Elise released the harness in frustration. "So this is my fault." "This is communication. Fault isn't useful." Teresa guided her back into position. They completed the route, but Elise's confidence had disappeared. When they returned to the apartment, Graham was waiting outside with Mabel. He had brought coffee. Elise smelled it before he spoke. "How did it go?" he asked. "She confused Finn at the pharmacy," Teresa said. Elise turned sharply. "I can answer for myself." Teresa remained calm. "You're right." Graham handed Elise a cup. "What happened?" Elise explained the missed door. Graham listened for less than a minute before offering a solution. "Maybe you should practice the entrance without customers around. I could ask the manager if they'd let us come before opening." Teresa looked at him. "She doesn't need access to an empty building." "I was only suggesting—" "She needs a partner," Teresa said, "not a second instructor." Graham's hand tightened around Mabel's leash. Elise said nothing. The 4 of them entered the building. Finn walked beside Elise in harness. Mabel followed with Graham. Inside the elevator, Finn repeatedly turned his head toward the retired dog. When the doors opened on the 4th floor, Elise gave the forward command. Finn did not move. Mabel and Graham stepped out first. Finn remained inside, watching them leave. The elevator doors began to close with Elise and Finn still inside. Teresa stopped them with one hand. "Forward," Elise commanded. Finn remained in place. Mabel's collar sounded in the hallway. Finn turned his head toward it again. "Finn, forward." The young dog stepped out at last, but instead of guiding Elise toward her apartment, he pulled gently in Mabel's direction. Teresa took hold of the elevator doors until everyone was safely outside. "He's distracted by her," she said. "He's curious," Elise replied. "They've met once. He needs to understand that the harness means work." "He does understand." "Then we have to make certain everyone around him respects it." Graham looked down at Mabel. "I can leave." Elise's hand tightened on Finn's harness. "You just arrived." "We can visit another day." "No, Elise, I said no." Teresa did not argue. She asked Graham to keep Mabel at the opposite end of the apartment and instructed Elise to remove Finn's harness before allowing the dogs to interact. Once the harness came off, Finn raced toward Mabel. Mabel endured his attention for less than a minute before walking into the kitchen and lying beside the refrigerator. Finn followed and stretched out beside her. Their front paws touched. Elise sat on the floor between them, one hand resting on each dog. Her shoulders relaxed. Graham saw the change immediately. The tension that had followed her home from the training center disappeared. Her voice became warmer. She laughed when Finn tried to steal the edge of Mabel's bed, and Mabel refused to move. For the first time, the four of them seemed to belong in the same room. That was why Graham did not leave, and it was why he returned 2 days later. Then again, on Saturday. Each visit followed the same pattern. Finn struggled to remain focused until his harness came off. Elise spent the next hour beside Mabel. When Graham finally took the retired dog home, Finn searched the apartment after them. Teresa reduced the visits to twice a week. Elise agreed. Then she called Graham on a Wednesday evening. "Can you bring her?" "She was there yesterday." "I know. She may need rest." "She sleeps most of the day." "So do I when I have the opportunity." "Graham." He heard the strain in her voice. "What happened?" "Nothing." "That doesn't sound like nothing." "We had a difficult route." "Where?" "Downtown." "What went wrong?" "I gave a late command. Finn took us into the wrong entrance." "Teresa corrected me in front of half the sidewalk." "She was doing her job." "I know." Graham sat on the edge of his bed. Mabel was asleep near the door. "Do you want to talk about it?" "No." "What do you want?" "I want to see Mabel." Graham looked at the old dog. He remembered Teresa's warning, but he also remembered Elise sitting in the empty apartment, surrounded by silence she had never chosen. "I'll bring her." When he arrived, Elise was waiting in the lobby without Finn. "Where is he?" Graham asked. "Upstairs." "Alone?" "He can remain alone for several hours." "I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did." Mabel moved toward Elise. She knelt and wrapped her arms around the dog. Graham watched the hardness leave her face. They walked around the block with Elise using her cane. Mabel moved beside Graham on the ordinary leash. At the corner, Elise reached for Graham's arm. He felt her hand close just above his elbow. She did not need him to guide her. Her cane found the curb. She knew the route, but she kept her hand there. After the kiss in the park, neither of them had spoken about what happened. Graham had decided not to press. Now, as they walked beneath the streetlights, Elise said, "You still owe me an answer." "I know." "Have you found one?" "Part of one." "I'm listening." Graham slowed. "I love the way you hear the truth before I'm ready to say it." "That sounds inconvenient." "It is." "What else?" "You make me ask instead of assume." "That is something I make you do." "Yes." "I asked what you love about me." Graham thought carefully. "The way you make jokes when you're frightened, the way you remember every sound but pretend not to remember compliments, the way you argued with a drawer for 6 months rather than ask Caroline to fix it. She would have reorganized the kitchen." "I know." Elise's hand remained on his arm. "And I love that you let Mabel retire, even though keeping her in harness would have made your life easier." She stopped walking. Graham stopped beside her. "That had nothing to do with you needing me," he said. "No. It had everything to do with who you are." Elise turned toward his voice. "Why couldn't you say that in the park?" "Because I wasn't sure I understood it then." "And now?" "Now I'm beginning to." She reached for his face. Her fingers found his cheek, then the line of his jaw. This time, Elise kissed him. It was not gratitude. It was not pity. And because she had moved first, neither of them had to ask. Mabel stood patiently beside them. When they returned to the apartment building, Finn was waiting behind the door. The moment Elise entered, he pressed against her legs and sniffed Mabel's scent on her coat. The following morning, he ignored his breakfast and searched each room. At their training session, he turned twice when he heard another dog behind them. Teresa stopped the route. "Did Mabel visit last night?" Elise's expression hardened. "For an hour. We agreed on Tuesdays and Saturdays." "I had a bad day." "Then we need to address the bad day without using Mabel to recover from it." "She isn't medication." "No, she's your retired guide. She's my family. And Finn is trying to become your working partner." Elise folded her arms. "He will." "Not if every difficult experience sends you back to the dog you already trust." The words stayed with Elise, but that evening she asked Graham to bring Mabel again. He refused for 11 minutes. Then she said, "I don't need advice. I need 1 normal hour." Graham put Mabel in the truck. 2 visits became 3. The planned 1-hour meetings became entire evenings. Graham knew they were making a mistake. He also knew that each visit brought him closer to Elise. They cooked together. They listened to old records. Elise worked at the kitchen table while Graham read beside her. Sometimes they said nothing for an hour. It resembled a life he had not realized he wanted. To protect it, he ignored every sign that something was going wrong. Finn began hesitating whenever Graham approached with Mabel. He watched the retired dog instead of Elise. During harness work, He responded more slowly after visits. Elise blamed the unfamiliar routes. Graham wanted to believe her. The mistake happened on a Monday afternoon. Teresa designed a route through an area Elise did not know. It included a pharmacy, a bus stop, 2 controlled intersections, and a construction detour. Graham was not supposed to be there. He had driven Mabel to a veterinary appointment nearby and arrived early. As he crossed the street toward his truck, he saw Elise and Finn half a block away. He stayed at a distance. Finn guided Elise around a sidewalk barrier and stopped at the curb. Teresa followed several steps behind. Traffic moved from left to right. Elise listened. A delivery van stopped near the intersection, blocking part of the sound. Finn shifted slightly to the left. It was the same movement Mabel had once used to indicate a clear route around an obstacle. Elise responded from memory. Left! Finn turned. The command directed them away from the marked crossing and toward the edge of the intersection. Teresa called out, "Elise, stop!" Elise froze. Finn stopped immediately. A car turned through the space several yards ahead of them. No one was close to being struck. But Elise heard the engine. She understood where the command had taken them. Teresa reached her side. "What happened?" "He told me to turn." "No." He adjusted his position. "That means an obstacle. For Mabel, perhaps, not for Finn." Elise's breathing became shallow. "I felt the harness move." "You interpreted Finn through Mabel's signals." Graham stood across the street, holding Mabel's leash. The retired dog saw Elise. Her tail began to move. Finn heard the collar. He turned toward the sound. Elise felt the movement through the harness. "Mabel is here," she said. Teresa looked across the street and saw Graham. Her expression changed. Elise called his name. Graham could not pretend he had not heard. He crossed only after the signal changed. "What are you doing here?" Elise asked. "Mabel had a veterinary appointment. You were watching us?" "I saw you from the other side." Elise crouched and reached for Mabel. Teresa stopped her. "Not while Finn is in harness." Elise stood again. "She nearly walked into traffic," Graham said. "No," Teresa replied. "Finn stopped when instructed, and I was in position to intervene." "She gave the wrong command." "Yes. Then this route is too advanced." Teresa turned toward him. "The route is not the problem." Graham understood what she meant. He looked at Mabel. Elise's face tightened. "Don't speak about me as if I'm not here." Teresa faced her. "You're right, so I'll say it directly. You are not learning Finn's signals because you continue to rely emotionally on Mabel. One mistake doesn't prove that." "No, the pattern proves it." Elise held the harness with both hands. "I can correct it." "I believe you can." "Then let us finish the route." "Not today." The words struck harder than Elise expected. Teresa had never ended a session early. "I'm fine." "This isn't a punishment. Finn is distracted and you're upset." "I said I'm fine. And I'm responsible for evaluating whether the team can work safely." Elise released the harness. For a moment, Graham thought she might remove it and walk away. Instead, she took a breath and gave Finn the command to return to the curb. He obeyed. Teresa arranged transportation back to the apartment. Elise refused Graham's offer to drive her. She also refused to say goodbye to Mabel. That evening, Teresa came to Graham's house. Mabel greeted her at the door and returned to her bed. "She's settled here," Teresa said. "I think so." "That's good." Graham knew there was more. What happens to Elise's training? We pause the independent routes for several days. Because of one command? Because she is trying to work with two guide dogs. One of them is no longer wearing a harness, but Elise is still following her. Graham sat at the kitchen table. "I can bring Mabel less often." "We already tried that." "Once a week?" "No." "Then shorter visits." Graham: "She needs time." "Yes, time with Finn." "She thinks you're asking her to abandon Mabel." "I'm asking her to allow Mabel to retire." Graham looked toward the old dog. "She'll hate me?" "Possibly." "She already thinks I want to control her." "Then don't control her." "What is the difference?" Teresa sat across from him. "You control her when you decide what she should feel. You support her when you make the decision that belongs to you and allow her to feel whatever she feels." "My decision?" "Mabel lives with you now. You decide whether to continue bringing her into a situation that is harming Elise's new partnership." Graham's hands rested on the table. He thought of Elise reaching for him beneath the streetlights. He thought of the quiet evenings in her apartment. If he stopped the visits, he might lose all of it. Teresa stood. At the door, she looked back at him. "If you really love her, you may have to become the person she hates." Graham canceled the next visit in a text message. He wrote it 6 times before sending it. The first version was too long. The second sounded like a report from Teresa. The third contained 3 solutions, 2 apologies, and a proposed schedule. In the final version, he wrote only, "I won't bring Mabel tonight. We need to talk first." Elise called less than a minute later. "What did Teresa say to you?" Graham stood at the kitchen window. Mabel slept in the yard beneath the maple tree. "She said the visits are interfering with your work with Finn." "She already told me that." "I know." "Then why are you canceling?" "Because I think she's right." Silence. "You thought she was right yesterday," Elise said. "You still brought Mabel to the veterinary appointment." "That was scheduled." "You knew where we were training." "No, you watched us." "I saw you from across the street." "And now you've decided I can't see my own dog." "That isn't what I said." "It's exactly what you're doing." Graham closed his eyes. "I don't want to have this conversation over the phone." "Then bring her." "I'll come alone." "No." "Elise." "If Mabel isn't with you, there's nothing to discuss." She ended the call. At 6:15, Graham placed Mabel's leash on the hook beside the door. At 6:30, he prepared dinner, but did not eat. At 7, he heard a vehicle stop outside. Then came the sound of a car door closing. Graham looked through the front window. Elise stood at the curb with Finn in harness. She gave the forward command. Finn guided her along the walkway and stopped at the front steps. Graham opened the door before she knocked. "You shouldn't have come alone." The moment he said it, he knew it was wrong. Elise's face hardened. I came with Finn. I meant without telling me? You knew I wanted to see Mabel. Finn led her up the steps. Mabel appeared in the hallway. Her collar moved. Finn's head turned immediately. Elise felt the change in the harness. Finn, forward. He entered the house, but pulled slightly toward Mabel. Graham stepped between the dogs. Please remove his harness first. Don't tell me how to handle him. I'm trying to keep them from... You're always trying. Elise removed the harness and knelt. Mabel moved into her arms. For several seconds, anger disappeared from Elise's face. She pressed her cheek against the dog's head and breathed in the familiar scent of her coat. Finn circled them, excited. He nudged Elise's arm. She pushed him away without thinking. Not now. Finn stepped back. Graham saw it. So did Elise. The young dog lowered himself near the wall. Mabel remained in her arms. Elise's hand became still. This is what Teresa means, Graham said quietly. She stood. You don't get to use one moment against me. I'm not. You invited me into your house. You offered to take care of Mabel. You promised I could visit whenever I wanted. I know. Now you've changed the rules. Because something changed. What changed? Finn is struggling. I am struggling? Yes. And your answer is to take away the one thing that makes it easier. Graham looked at Mabel for an hour. What? Seeing her makes it easier for an hour. Then Finn searches for her. You compare him to her. The next route becomes harder. You sound exactly like Teresa. She's trying to help you succeed. I didn't ask you to join her. No, you asked me to take Mabel. And you said yes. That means I have a responsibility to her, too. Elise turned toward his voice. Don't pretend this is about protecting Mabel. It is partly about her. What is the rest? Graham had prepared an answer. He had planned to explain the 6-week separation Teresa recommended. He had planned to offer regular messages about Mabel's health, recordings of her playing in the yard, and visits after Elise completed training. Standing in front of her, every prepared sentence sounded like another list. The rest is that I love you, he said. Elise went still. Finn raised his head from the floor. Graham continued. And every time you ask me to bring Mabel, I say yes because it gives me a reason to see you. That isn't love. I know. Do you? I know it isn't enough. Elise's breathing changed. You told me you loved who I was. I do? Then trust me to decide what I need. I'm trying. No, you've already decided. I've decided what I will do. That isn't the same thing. What does that mean? Mabel can remain here and I will care for her. Or you can take her home. That choice belongs to you. Elise's face tightened. But I won't keep bringing her to your apartment while Finn is learning to work with you. You're giving me a choice you know I can't make. You can make it. If I take Mabel home, I risk losing Finn. Yes, and if I leave her here, I lose her. For 6 weeks. You don't know what 6 weeks feels like to me. No, Mabel was there when I woke up and couldn't see the window anymore." Graham said nothing. "She was there the first time I walked outside after Jonathan left. She was there when I learned how to cross a street without seeing the light change. She was there when I stopped being afraid of my own apartment." Elise's voice broke. "And now everyone is telling me that loving her correctly means leaving her." "No one is asking you to stop loving her. You're asking me to prove it by staying away." Graham moved one step closer, then stopped. "I'm asking you to give Finn the chance Mabel once had. I didn't have another dog when I met Mabel. No. I didn't have to lose someone before I could trust her. No. You keep saying that word as if agreeing with me makes this less cruel. What do you want me to say? That you understand?" "I don't." The answer silenced her. Graham's voice lowered. "I don't understand what it is to lose my sight. I don't understand what Mabel gave you, and I don't understand how empty your apartment sounded that first night." Elise turned away. "But I understand what I'm doing now," he said. "Do you?" "I'm risking the only relationship I've wanted in years because keeping it this way may be hurting you." Elise laughed once without humor. "You think that makes you noble?" "No." "You think disappearing with Mabel proves you love me?" "No." "Then what does it prove?" "That I finally know when helping has become another way of being selfish." Elise's hand found the back of a chair. She held it tightly. Graham wanted to go to her. He wanted to place her hand on his arm and tell her he would change the decision. He wanted to bring Mabel upstairs every evening until Finn's training failed and Elise blamed everyone except him. He knew how to make the pain stop for 1 hour. That was the problem. "You were waiting for this," Elise said. "For what?" "For me to need you." "That isn't true." "You repaired my leash. You drove me to the veterinarian. You fixed my apartment. You took Mabel." "You asked me to do those things." "Because you made certain you were always there to ask." Graham felt the words strike places he had tried not to examine. Elise continued, "You didn't fall in love with me. You fell in love with being needed." The room became silent. Mabel stood between them. Graham could have defended himself. He could have listed every moment when Elise had made the first choice, the invitation to walk through the park, the call about the cabinet, the dinner, the kiss beneath the streetlights. But none of those moments erased the truth in what she had said. "Maybe part of me did," he admitted. Elise's face changed. She had expected him to deny it. Graham continued, "That is why I have to stop." Her hand slipped from the chair. "Stop what?" "Using your need for Mabel as my reason to remain close to you." "So you're leaving?" "No. That is what men call it when they want to feel better about leaving. I'm standing right here. For how long? As long as you want me here." Elise reached for Finn's harness. Graham picked it up, but did not hand it to her until she extended her palm. Their fingers did not touch. Elise secured the harness around Finn. Mabel approached her. Elise knelt one last time. She placed both hands on the old dog's face. "I'm not abandoning you," she whispered. Mabel licked her chin. Elise stood quickly. "Finn, find the door." Finn guided her toward the hallway. Graham opened the front door. At the top of the steps, Elise stopped. "Don't call me." Graham gripped the door frame. "Elise, I mean it." He thought of all the arguments he could make. She was upset. She might regret it. She should wait until morning. He said none of them. "If that is what you want, I won't." Elise descended the steps with Finn. Graham watched until the ride-share vehicle carried them away. Then he closed the door. Mabel remained in the hallway, facing the place where Elise had disappeared. Graham sat on the floor beside her. After several minutes, he noticed the small steel loop attached to her blue collar, the piece from his key ring, the temporary repair that had lasted longer than anyone expected. Graham unscrewed it and held it in his palm. He thought of putting it back with his keys. He thought of throwing it away. Instead, he fastened it to Mabel's collar again. Then he sat beside the old dog and listened to the empty house. For the first 9 days, Elise waited for Graham to break his promise. She kept her phone beside her while she worked. Every time it vibrated, she stopped what she was doing. A message from Caroline. An appointment reminder, a notification from the grocery store, never Graham. By the 10th day, his silence no longer felt temporary. It felt like an answer. Elise told herself she had requested it. That did not prevent her from hating him for obeying. Finn felt the change in her before anyone else did. He began following her from room to room when he was not working. At night, he slept outside her bedroom door, the same place Mabel had once chosen. The first time Elise found him there, she told him to move to his bed. The second time, she stepped over him. By the third night, she left the door open. Training resumed slowly. Teresa returned to basic roots: the grocery store, the pharmacy, the bus stop, and the park entrance. Finn's concentration improved without Mabel nearby. Elise's did not. She gave commands too early. She tightened her grip whenever Finn changed direction. At curbs, she sometimes asked him to move before she had finished listening to traffic. He responded by becoming cautious. "You're making him uncertain," Teresa said after one difficult route. "I thought Finn was confident." "He is, but you're telling him with the harness that you don't trust his decisions." "What should I do?" "Stop trying to predict him." "That sounds safe." "You don't have to surrender judgment. You have to give him space to do his part." Elise held the harness with both hands. "That is what everyone keeps telling me." "About Finn?" "About everything." Teresa did not ask for an explanation. They continued. At the next corner, Finn stopped. Elise listened to traffic. A vehicle idled on her left. Tires moved across wet pavement in front of her. The accessible pedestrian signal began to sound. "Forward!" Finn did not move. Elise tightened the harness. "Forward!" He remained still. Her chest constricted. The last time a dog refused to move, Mabel had been nearing retirement. Every hesitation had become evidence that their life together was ending. "Elise," Teresa said, What is Finn telling you? That he doesn't trust the crossing. Then find out why. Elise listened again. A delivery truck was reversing into an alley beyond the curb. Its warning beeps overlapped the pedestrian signal. She waited. The truck stopped. Finn stepped forward on the next command. He had not failed. He had known something she did not. That evening, Elise sat on the kitchen floor with Finn beside her. She found the shape of his head and ran her fingers over his ears. "You aren't making this easy." Finn placed one paw on her leg. "Mabel never did that." He placed the second paw beside the first. "You also have no respect for boundaries." Finn leaned his full weight against her. Elise laughed despite herself. Then she felt guilty for laughing. The emotion came so quickly that she pushed him away. Finn returned to his bed. Elise remained on the floor. She understood the cruelty of what she was doing. Finn had not taken Mabel from her. He had not asked Graham to stop visiting. He had not caused Jonathan to leave. Yet every time he behaved differently from Mabel, Elise treated the difference as a betrayal. On the 13th day, Caroline came from Vancouver, Washington, carrying groceries and enough prepared food for a week. Elise opened the door and immediately smelled onions, garlic, and Caroline's perfume. "I didn't ask you to come." "You stopped answering messages." "I replied yesterday." "You sent a thumbs-up symbol." "It accurately represented my feelings." Caroline carried the bags into the kitchen. Finn followed. "Where is Graham?" she asked. "Not here." "I noticed." "We aren't seeing each other." "Did he decide that?" "I did." "Why?" Elise began removing items from the bags, identifying each container by touch. "Because he thinks I need to stay away from Mabel." Caroline placed a carton of soup in the refrigerator. "Is he wrong?" Elise stopped. "You sound like Teresa." "I don't know Teresa." "You'd like her." "Then she must be very patient." Elise closed the refrigerator. "Graham took my dog and then decided when I was allowed to see her." "You asked him to take Mabel." "That doesn't give him the right to control my relationship with her." "No." Caroline leaned against the counter. "But it gives him the right to decide what happens in his own home." Elise turned toward her sister. "Whose side are you on?" "Yours." "It doesn't sound like it." "Being on your side does not require me to tell you that everyone else is wrong." Finn sat between them. Caroline lowered her voice. "You told me once that Jonathan stayed 4 months after he wanted to leave." "That has nothing to do with this. You said those were the worst 4 months because every kind thing he did felt like a debt." Elise's hands closed around the edge of the counter. "Graham isn't Jonathan." "No." "Then why are you comparing them?" "I'm not." Caroline touched her sister's hand. "You are." Elise pulled away. Caroline did not follow. "Graham did what you asked," she said. "He stopped calling. That was easy for him. Do you know that? He has Mabel. And you have Finn. That isn't the same." "No, it isn't supposed to be." Caroline left an hour later. She did not repair anything. She did not rearrange the kitchen. Before going, she placed one container of soup exactly 8 inches to the right of the stove. On the 16th day, Elise told Teresa she wanted to leave the program. They were standing outside the apartment after Finn had missed the pharmacy entrance for the second time. "I can work with my cane," Elise said. "I know. I don't need a guide dog." "No." The lack of argument irritated her. "You're supposed to convince me to continue." "Is that what you want?" "I want you to admit this match isn't working." Teresa waited. Finn stood quietly in harness. "The match is working," she said. "You aren't allowing yourself to believe it. You didn't feel what happened at the door." "No, I watched it." "He missed the entrance." "You turned your body toward the street because you heard a bus. Finn followed the direction you gave him. So it was my fault again." "It was a mistake. You are allowed to make one." "I can't make mistakes in traffic." "You made mistakes with Mabel." "Not like this." "You don't remember the beginning accurately." Elise gripped the harness. "I remember everything." "You remember what 8 years built. You do not remember every difficult day that built it." The words followed Elise into the apartment. That night, she searched through old voice recordings on her phone. Most contained work notes, grocery lists, and reminders. Then she found one recorded 7 years earlier. Her own voice sounded younger, more frightened. "Mabel won't enter the train station. She keeps turning toward the street. The instructor says I'm giving the wrong command, but I know what I said." Another recording. "Mabel missed the office door again. Maybe they matched me with the wrong dog." And another. "Today, she stopped before I heard the car." I think I trusted her for the first time. Elise played the last recording twice. Then she sat beside Finn's bed. "I'm sorry," she said. Finn lifted his head. "I remembered the ending and blamed you for being at the beginning." She placed one hand on his chest. His heartbeat was quick and steady. "Will you try again?" Finn licked her wrist. 4 days later, Teresa assigned them a route through a neighborhood Elise did not know. It began at a small grocery store and ended at a community center 9 blocks away. Teresa followed far enough behind that Elise could not hear her footsteps. The first 2 intersections were quiet. Finn stopped correctly, waited for the forward command, and crossed in a straight line. At the 3rd intersection, a large delivery truck was parked close to the corner. Its engine was running. The sound blocked traffic approaching from Elise's left. Finn stopped at the curb. Elise listened. She heard no moving vehicles. The pedestrian signal activated. "Forward." Finn did not move. Elise waited. The signal continued. "Forward." Finn remained still. Her old fear returned. They would miss the crossing. Teresa would stop the route. Finn did not trust her. Elise shifted her weight forward. The dog stepped sideways and blocked her with his body. "Finn, forward!" He refused. Elise felt anger rise. Then she remembered the recording. "Today she stopped before I heard the car." Elise became still. She loosened her grip on the harness. "I'm listening," she whispered. For several seconds there was only the truck's engine. Then tires struck a metal cover in the road. A car appeared from behind the truck and turned across the crossing. It passed directly in front of them. Elise heard the rush of air after it was gone. Finn had seen the car. He had understood that the driver would turn, even though the pedestrian signal gave Elise the right of way, and he had refused to obey. The signal ended. Traffic began moving again. Elise crouched beside him. Finn remained alert, still working. She placed one hand against his chest. His heart beat beneath her palm. Not Mabel's heartbeat, Finn's. "You knew," Elise whispered. His tail moved once. "You knew, and I didn't." Teresa approached, but did not speak. Elise stood. She waited through the next light cycle. When the signal activated again and the traffic was safe, she gave the command. "Finn, forward!" This time he moved. They crossed together. At the community center, Teresa told Elise she had completed the route successfully. Elise removed Finn's harness and sat on the steps. He pressed against her side. "I thought trusting him meant forgetting her," she said. Teresa sat nearby. "What do you think now?" "I think Mabel taught me how to reach this moment." Finn rested his head on Elise's knee. "And he didn't ask me to erase anything." "No." Elise touched the top of his head. "When can we take the final route?" Teresa hesitated. "We had planned another week of training." "I know. Today went well, but one route isn't proof." "No." Elise smiled faintly. "Then give us enough routes to prove it." Over the next 6 days, Elise and Finn worked through rain, traffic, crowded sidewalks, buses, elevators, and unfamiliar buildings. They made mistakes. They corrected them. They continued. On the 26th day of the separation, Elise returned to the intersection where she had given the wrong command. Finn stopped at the curb. She listened. Then she trusted what moved through the harness. They crossed safely. Back at the apartment, Teresa removed her wet coat. "You're ready," she said. Elise found Finn's head. "For what?" "The final route." Elise's phone lay on the kitchen counter. For the first time in nearly 4 weeks, she did not wonder whether Graham would call. She had somewhere to go without him. On the 27th day without Elise, Graham called his former wife. She answered after 4 rings. "Is something wrong?" The question told him how rarely he called. "No." "Your mother?" "She's fine." "The house? Still standing?" "Then why are you calling?" Graham sat in his truck outside the library. Rain moved slowly across the windshield. "I need to ask you something." "You could have done that 3 years ago." "I know." Silence followed. Then she said, "What do you want to ask?" Graham looked at the empty passenger seat. "Why did you leave?" His former wife released a quiet breath. "You know why." "I know what I told myself." "And what was that?" "That you were unhappy, that we had stopped spending time together, that you wanted a different life. Those things were true, but they weren't the answer." "No." Graham tightened his grip on the phone. "Would you meet me?" "Why?" "Because I don't want to ask this badly." "You've already asked." "I want to listen correctly." They met the following Saturday at a coffee shop near Laurelhurst Park. Graham arrived early. His former wife came in at 10 precisely. She looked almost the same as she had 3 years earlier, except her hair was shorter, and she wore glasses he had never seen. For one irrational second, Graham felt offended that her face had changed without his knowledge. Then he understood how much life had happened after she left. She sat across from him. "You look tired," she said. "I have a dog." She raised her eyebrows. "You never wanted a dog." "I never wanted the responsibility." What changed? A woman needed a retirement home for her guide dog. His former wife looked toward the window. "There it is." "What?" "Someone needed you." Graham did not defend himself. "That's why I called." He told her about Elise. Not everything. He did not describe the kiss in the park or the nights he had waited for the sound of her phone call. He explained Mabel's retirement, Finn's training, and the decision to stop the visits. When he finished, his former wife held her coffee without drinking. "What did Elise say?" "That I didn't fall in love with her. I fell in love with being needed." "And was she right?" "Partly." His former wife nodded. The absence of surprise hurt. "Did you feel that way too?" Graham asked. No. He had expected agreement. "What did you feel?" She looked at him for a long moment. "I felt managed." Graham waited. "You remembered every appointment," she continued. "You repaired everything in the house before I noticed it was broken. When my father got sick, you organized his medications, drove him to treatment, and installed railings in his bathroom. I was trying to help." "I know." "Then why did it make you unhappy?" "Because help was the only way you knew how to love me." Graham lowered his eyes. His former wife continued. "When I was frightened, you gave me information. When I was angry, you offered solutions. When I said I was lonely, you changed your work schedule. I thought that was what you wanted. You never asked. I knew you wanted more time together. No, you decided more time would fix the problem. What did you want? For you to tell me you were lonely too." Graham looked up. "I was. I know that now. Why didn't you know then?" "Because you never needed anything from me." The answer struck with the force of recognition. His former wife leaned back. "You made yourself useful every day, reliable, necessary. But there was no place for me to do anything for you." "I thought that made life easier." "It made me feel replaceable." Graham remembered Elise standing in his hallway. You fell in love with being needed. He had believed the need created security. If someone depended on him, they would have a reason to remain. But his former wife had not wanted a reason. She had wanted a relationship. "I'm sorry," he said. She looked at him carefully. "You apologized when I left." "I apologized for failing to solve the problem." "Yes. This time, I'm sorry I never allowed you to be the person who stayed." Her eyes filled, but she smiled. "I did stay, Graham, for 12 years. I know." "No. You know now." They finished their coffee. Before leaving, his former wife asked whether he wanted Elise back. "Yes." "What are you going to do?" "Nothing. That will be difficult for you." "It already is." "And if she doesn't return?" Graham looked through the window at the park. "Then I will still have done one thing she asked me to do." He drove home to Mabel. The old dog met him at the door carrying his left work glove. Graham crouched and took it gently from her. "You always choose the left one." Mabel wagged her tail. He wondered whether Elise had told him that, or whether he had learned it after she left. The days continued. Graham repaired boilers, doors, lights, and damaged shelves. Each evening he returned to the quiet house. He never called Elise. He did not drive past her apartment. He did not ask Teresa for information she had no right to provide. Once he recorded Mabel sleeping beside the fireplace. His thumb hovered over Elise's name. Then he deleted the recording. On the 35th day, Mabel stopped eating breakfast. Graham's first instinct was to call Elise. Instead, he contacted Dr. Patel. The veterinarian examined Mabel that afternoon. The dog had an upset stomach, probably caused by something she had eaten in the yard. Dr. Patel prescribed medication and recommended a bland diet. Mabel ate dinner that evening. Graham still did not call. He understood that keeping his promise did not mean hiding an emergency. If Mabel had been seriously ill, Elise would have needed to know. But this was not an emergency. It was an excuse. And for the first time, Graham refused to turn a problem into a door back into someone's life. On the 42nd day, Elise began her final route. Teresa met her outside the apartment at 8 in the morning. The evaluation would include a bus ride, 2 busy intersections, a public building, an unfamiliar pedestrian detour, and the return trip. Elise checked Finn's harness. "You know where we're going?" she asked. Finn sneezed. "I'll assume that means yes." The first half of the route went smoothly. Finn found the bus stop, guided Elise through the front door, and located an open seat. Downtown, he avoided temporary signs and a line of people outside a coffee shop. At the first intersection, a driver stopped across the marked crossing. Finn found a safe path around the front of the vehicle without entering moving traffic. At the public building, he initially moved toward the wrong door. Elise stopped. She listened to the direction of the electronic entrance signal, adjusted her body, and gave the command again. Finn found the correct entrance. No one corrected them. They corrected each other. On the return route, construction blocked the sidewalk. A worker called from across the street. "You can cross here." Elise did not follow the voice. She asked Finn to find the curb, listened to traffic, and chose the controlled intersection at the end of the block. Teresa remained behind her. At the final crossing, Finn stopped. Elise gave the forward command too early. The dog refused. She waited. A silent electric car passed in front of them. Then Finn moved. When the crossing became safe, they reached the apartment 2 hours after leaving. Teresa removed the evaluation sheet from her bag. "You passed." Elise stood with one hand on Finn's harness. "That's all? Did you want a speech?" "I expected more paperwork." "There will always be more paperwork." Elise crouched beside Finn. He licked her ear. She laughed and held his face between her hands. "You stole my socks, missed 2 elevators, took me to the wrong pharmacy door, and ignored at least 6 perfectly reasonable commands. Finn's tail struck the pavement. And you were right when it mattered. Teresa waited until Elise stood. I can arrange a ride home. Elise turned toward the street. I don't want to go home. Where do you want to go? Elise had memorized Graham's address. Until that morning, she had never traveled there without him. She gave it to Teresa. That route involves a bus transfer and nearly half a mile on foot. I know. I can go with you. No. Teresa did not argue. She reviewed the route with Elise, checked the transit schedule, and remained nearby until Elise and Finn boarded the correct bus. Then she allowed them to leave alone. The journey took more than an hour. Elise missed the first transfer because construction had moved the temporary bus stop. She asked a transit employee for directions. At the final stop, Finn initially turned toward the wrong residential street. Elise checked the address on her phone, corrected their direction, and continued. They reached Graham's block shortly after noon. Elise recognized the neighborhood by sound. The maples moved differently from the trees near her apartment. Wind passed through their larger leaves with a low, restless whisper. Somewhere nearby, a bicycle bell rang. Finn stopped at the curb. Elise listened, gave the command, and crossed. At Graham's walkway, she hesitated. 6 weeks earlier, she had left this house believing he had chosen to abandon her. Now she understood that he had chosen to believe she could return without being rescued. Finn guided her to the 3 concrete steps. Elise found the railing. At the door, she lifted one hand. Before she could knock, Mabel barked from inside. Footsteps approached. The lock turned. The door opened. Graham did not speak. Elise heard his keys and knew it was him. She held Finn's harness with one hand. With the other, she reached toward Graham's voice. I need you to tell me whether I came to the right house. You came to the right house, Graham said. Elise lowered her hand. Neither of them moved. 6 weeks of silence stood between them, too large to cross with an apology and too fragile to survive the wrong words. Then Mabel pushed past Graham. The old dog's collar rang as she hurried through the doorway. Elise dropped to her knees. Mabel pressed against her with enough force to make her lose her balance. Elise laughed and buried her face in the dog's neck. I missed you. Mabel licked her cheek. I missed you so much. Finn stood beside them in harness. His body shifted with excitement, but he remained in position. Elise kept one hand on his handle while embracing Mabel with the other. Graham noticed. So did she. Mabel sniffed Finn. The young dog's tail moved, but he did not leave Elise's side. You waited, Elise whispered to him. Finn leaned lightly against her leg. She removed his harness. Only then did he greet Mabel. The 2 dogs circled each other in the doorway. Finn lowered his front legs, inviting her to play. Mabel ignored him and returned to Elise. Some things had not changed. Elise ran her fingers along Mabel's collar. She found the small steel loop. You kept it. Graham remained by the open door. Yes. Why? I took it off once. What happened? I put it back. That doesn't answer the question. No. Elise waited. Graham looked at the piece of metal. Because it was never supposed to last, he said, and it did. Elise stood. Finn's harness hung from her left hand. Mabel remained close to her right side, no longer responsible for guiding anyone. "May we come in?" Elise asked. Graham stepped back. Yes. Finn entered first and immediately searched the hallway. "He remembers the house," Graham said. "He remembers where you keep your socks." "I moved them." "That won't save you." Elise found the kitchen without assistance. Graham watched her locate the chair and sit at the table where they had once prepared Mabel's retirement plan. Finn lay beneath the window. Mabel settled beside Elise. "Would you like coffee?" Graham asked. "No." "Tea?" "No." "Water?" "Graham." He stopped. "You're trying to become useful. I don't know what else to do." "Sit down." He sat across from her. Elise placed both hands on the table. "I passed the final route this morning." Graham felt something move through his face before he could hide it. "You passed?" "Yes." "I knew you would." "No, you didn't." He considered the correction. "No," he admitted. "I hoped you would." "That's better." "How was it?" Finn found a bus stop, avoided a car blocking a crosswalk, ignored a stranger giving us bad directions, and refused one unsafe command. Graham looked toward the young Labrador. "What did you do?" "I listened to him." Finn's tail moved against the floor. Graham smiled. "I'm proud of you." "I didn't come here for that." His smile disappeared. "Why did you come?" Elise turned the steel loop on Mabel's collar between her fingers. "To ask why you never called." "You told me not to." "People say things when they're angry." "I know. You could have called once." "I almost did." "When?" "Every day." "Why didn't you?" Graham looked at her. "Because you asked me not to, and loving you had to mean believing you could come back by your own choice." Elise's fingers stopped moving. Outside, a truck passed along the wet street. "You didn't know I would come back." "No, you could have lost me." "I thought I had." "Then why keep waiting?" "I wasn't waiting for you to need me again." His voice was quiet. "I was waiting to learn whether you wanted me." Elise lowered her head. For years, she had believed that independence meant never allowing another person to become important enough to hurt her. Jonathan had taught her that need could become a weapon. Graham had taught her something different. A person could love her and still respect the door she closed. Even when standing outside, it hurt them both. "I was cruel to you," she said. "You were hurt. That doesn't make every word true." "Some of them were." Elise did not deny it. Graham continued. "I called my former wife." "Why?" "To ask the question I should have asked before she left." "What did she say?" "That she always knew I would take care of her. She just never believed I would allow her to take care of herself." Elise breathed slowly. "Did you apologize?" "Yes." "Did you try to repair anything?" "No." "That must have been difficult." "It was terrible." A faint smile touched her face. Graham placed his hands flat on the table. "I was wrong, Elise. About stopping the visits? No. Her smile disappeared. I was wrong about why I kept saying yes to them. He continued before she could respond. I told myself I was helping you, but I was afraid that, without Mabel, you would stop having a reason to call me. And I did. Yes. Does that make you regret it? No. The answer came without hesitation. Elise turned toward him. Graham did not add an explanation. He did not tell her what she should feel. He allowed the answer to stand. Elise reached beneath the table and found Finn's head. If I never need you the way I needed her, she asked, will you still want me? Graham looked at the woman sitting across from him. He thought of the first day in the park. She had been frightened, but even then she had not asked him to take control. She had asked where Mabel was. He thought of her laughter in the rose garden, her hands exploring the repaired cabinet, and the way she described problems no one else could hear. I don't want to be the reason you can walk, he said. I only want to be someone you sometimes choose to walk toward. Elise's eyes filled. I'm still afraid. So am I. What are you afraid of? Doing the wrong thing, saying the wrong thing, becoming the man you accused me of being. You were that man. Partly. You may be again. Probably. That isn't reassuring. It's true. Elise wiped her cheek. What can you promise? Graham thought before answering. I can't promise you'll never be afraid. I can promise you'll never have to guess whether I'm telling you the truth. The room became silent. Mabel breathed beside Elise. Finn slept beneath the window. Two dogs, who had never been meant to replace each other, rested in the same room. Elise stood and walked around the table. She found Graham's shoulder, then his hand. Her fingers closed around his. I didn't come because I needed help getting here. I know. I didn't come because I needed Mabel back. I know. I came because the road ended at your house, and I wanted to knock. Graham lifted her hand to his lips. This time, he did not ask what the gesture was supposed to fix. It did not need to fix anything. Elise leaned toward him. When they kissed, Mabel remained asleep. Finn woke, found one of Graham's socks beneath a chair, and carried it into the hallway. 3 months later, the four of them returned to the park. Winter had stripped most of the leaves from the trees. The air smelled of rain and wood smoke. Finn guided Elise along the bicycle path. Graham walked beside her with Mabel on an ordinary leash. The retired dog had grown slower, but she still stopped to investigate every tree. Her blue collar carried the same steel loop from the day they met. Elise and Graham no longer saw each other every day. They had learned that closeness did not have to become dependence. Elise traveled for work with Finn. Graham continued managing the library buildings. Mabel remained at his house, where she had claimed the best rug and nearly every left glove he owned. Some evenings, Elise stayed with Graham. On others, she returned to her own apartment. Neither choice was treated as evidence of love or its absence. They reached the green bench. A group of children approached on bicycles. Their bells rang across the path. Mabel stopped. For a moment, Graham felt the leash tighten. Then the old dog looked up at him and continued walking. The sound no longer frightened her. Finn moved Elise safely to the side of the path. Graham opened his mouth to warn her. Then he stopped himself. The bicycles passed. Elise smiled. "You almost warned me. I'm learning." "So am I." They reached the bench where Graham had once repaired the broken leash. "Would you like to sit?" he asked. "No." Elise turned toward a narrower path leading between the trees. It was uneven and unfamiliar. Wet leaves covered the ground, and the sounds of the city faded beyond the branches. "I want to take that one." Graham looked ahead. "The path near the trees?" "Yes. It may be muddy." "Is it dangerous?" "No." "Then Finn can handle the mud." She gave the command. Finn guided her toward the unfamiliar path. Graham and Mabel followed. After several steps, Elise stopped and turned back. "Are you coming?" "If you want me to." "I do." Graham moved beside her. She reached for his hand. He allowed her to find it. "Do you know where this path leads?" he asked. "No." Elise laced her fingers through his. "But that doesn't mean I'm lost." Together they continued beneath the trees. Finn guided Elise around the roots and stones. Mabel walked beside Graham, carrying no responsibility except the simple work of growing old. And Graham did not lead Elise. He did not follow her. He walked beside her, because she had chosen a place for him there. Elise had once believed that love would come only when she needed someone enough. But love had not found her, because she was helpless. It had waited until she was free enough to choose it. They continued down the unfamiliar path. Finn guided Elise around the roots hidden beneath the wet leaves. Mabel walked beside Graham, carrying no responsibility except the simple work of growing old. And Graham did not lead Elise. He did not follow her. He walked beside her because she had chosen a place for him there. For years, Elise had believed that love began when one person needed another. She had believed that being blind meant she would always have to choose between dependence and loneliness. But Graham had not loved her because she needed his hands, his car, his house, or his help. And she had not returned because she needed him to show her the way. She had learned the route herself. She had crossed the streets with Finn. She had found the right bus, corrected the wrong turn, and reached Graham's door without anyone leading her there. She came back when she no longer needed him. And that was how they both knew it was love. Not the kind of love that rescues someone, not the kind that makes promises no human being can keep, but the quieter kind. The kind that asks before helping. The kind that listens before repairing. The kind that sometimes steps aside and trusts that if a person returns, it will be because they are free enough to choose you. Elise tightened her fingers around Graham's hand. Ahead of them, the path turned beneath the trees. Neither of them knew where it led. They kept walking anyway, together.